I think let's get started here. And we're going to start up. We've got two bills from Senator Mouts. And Senator, why don't you come up? You can either use the podium, you can sit at the table, whatever you prefer. But we're going to start with Senate Bill 775, and you've got just one witness, Carl Knorr. Mr. Knorr, is that who you've designated from Evo Public House? Does that sound wrong?
Actually, Chairman, that's the wrong bill. I'm the only witness on this bill. We've got written testimony and my oral testimony.
778. Okay, I've got 778 and 775 are both Mouts, so you're okay.
He was really looking forward to testifying.
Okay, so we might have a little bit of a mix up here on the between. Let's get a little clarity, because I know one of the bills you withdrew one of the bills. I just want to make sure we.
Yeah.
Oh, Carl Knorr is on the other bills, what you're saying.
Correct.
Oh, I apologize. I misunderstood. Okay. Well, with that said, Senator Mouts, the only witness on Senate Bill 775, and you've got the stage and all the time you need.
Chairman, thank you. And distinguished members of the committee, it's an honor to be here today. I'm presenting Senate Bill 775. And this legislation is designed to add some flexibility to what is commonly known as our living shoreline law. Currently, if landowners who want to stabilize their shoreline are required to install a living shoreline, however, they can request a waiver. And the waiver is very extensive, it's very particular, and there's a lot of discussion about the efficacy of the waiver. However, some of these living shoreline projects can be very expansive and very costly, which is a deterrent for landowners to install some of these shoreline protection systems. One idea for encouraging more landowners is to give them some discretion in how they stabilize their shoreline. And this breaks down as structural shoreline protection and non-structural shoreline protection. Typically, if you don't qualify for a waiver, the landowner will be required to use all non-structural shoreline protection measures. This legislation would give landowners a discretion. If they don't qualify for a waiver, they could use up to 10% of their project with a structural shoreline protection system. And to break that down for you, that would mean if someone had to install, say, 1,000 feet of living shoreline, and they prefer to have some of the area, what we call riprap with stone, that they would get 10% of that 1,000 feet. And I don't do good testifying and doing math, so I won't give you the number right here, but that's 100 feet, right? 10%, yeah, so you get 100 feet of riprap. And that's all this legislation does. It doesn't undermine or change any of the standards for shoreline protection or any other specifics. You'll see testimony from a constituent named Heather Murin. She's about to install a shoreline protection system that is very expansive. And if you look at the testimony, you'll see how this 10% can really benefit some landowners and give them the incentive to invest their money into protecting the shoreline and protecting the Chesapeake Bay. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. Any questions for Senator Mouts? We've got Senator Augustine.
Thank you, Senator. Senator, I just always want to give our colleagues an opportunity to respond when there's like unfavorable testimony. And the department came in and what they said was that an unintended consequence of the bill is that applicants may apply for the waived hybrid shoreline project, but only complete the structural component of the project, resulting in more hardened shoreline. Did they share that as sort of a significant part of their concerns with the legislation?
I have not talked to them, and I didn't hear you quite clear. Can you repeat it?
Yeah, sure. So what they're saying is an unintended consequence of the waiver is that they might complete a portion of the project, but then not complete the rest of it, which may end up with us having more hardened shoreline.
No, that question hasn't been brought to me. So they're arguing that if this were to become law, then a landowner could do the 10% shoreline and not complete the project.
Exactly.
That's a very valid point, and that would be addressed. We can bring this up. I put an amendment in to make sure that didn't happen.
And they also
We would-
suggest, Senator, that they're working hard to improve on this process as well, make it better. I mean, I'm just sharing like what they've said, they, as far as their testimony. Did they talk to you about that? yet?
We have not had the opportunity
Okay.
to communicate about that, but we have had some meetings, and I will follow up with the department, and I will bring some results back to the committee for your consideration.
Thank you, Senator.
Any additional questions for the sponsor? Okay, seeing none, that concludes the bill hearing on Senate Bill 775, and we're gonna and by the way, Mr. Noor had signed up on both bills. That was a little bit the confusion. So we're gonna now turn to Senate Bill 778. 778, and you've got Mr. Noor is that a designated sponsor panelist. We have some other folks signed up in person favorable too, but you only designated Mr. Noor as your sponsor panelist. So is he here?
Mr. Noor is here.
Okay, so why don't you, Mr. Noor, why don't you come on up?
Would it be possible to add the county executive to my sponsor panel? We may have-
She's actually signed up. So actually we have two other in-person signed favorable. So we'll call up the county executive, Giordano, and then Bunky Luffman is also signed up a favorable from Wacomico County. I don't know if he was planning on testifying as well.
Chairman, out of abundance of caution, we've had a number of individuals sign up. Mr. Luffman does not need to testify. but
Okay,
the
we'll
county
bring up the
executive-
county executive.
John.
County executive, why don't you sit down along with Mr. Noor and Senator, do you want to take the time to present the bill? Then we'll turn to the panel.
Yes, Chairman, thank you. And it's an honor to be here again to present Senate Bill 778. This legislation is targeted to address one issue. It's a local issue stemming out of Wacomico County. The legislation has not been improved from last year. It's in its same state as it was considered last year. This has been a multi-year process. And at the outset, I need to thank the Department of Environment and the Department of Health working with us on this problem and in getting this licensing straightened out for this important business. There's the work of Senator Eckert and Senator Carrozza have been deeply involved. And what we're trying to do with this legislation is find a way to get proper licensing, a proper licensing regime for a semi-permanent, seasonal, very limited food and beverage service in a very rural part of Wacomico County. It's amazing how complicated this can be. And years ago, we changed the rules for food service facilities, and we added in some variations, some mobile units, temporary units, and we're kind of in a place where we're trying to find a home where we can help this business succeed. And it's trying to be patient. Ultimately, there is a solution, and the solution's right here. Okay, that is the plan for Wacomico County. That is our solution. When we have running septic and the infrastructure in place, then the licensing will be easy. But for the time being, we were facing some demands in trying to meet the needs of our citizens, and that's why the local government has petitioned the state now to try to address this. This will be the second year this bill has been up. I'd encourage the committee a favorable vote and lace that with the concept that we do plan to bring some amended language and some new ideas based off of our discussion. So thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Why don't we go to the county executive next and then Mr. Noor after that. And each of you have 2 minutes.
Sure. Thank you so much for having us. So I am hoping for a favorable vote. I just would like to mention to this committee that my administration reviewed the hearing from last year and followed the suggestions from the committee to make this a local bill.
Wait, before you go, just because we're streaming, give us your full name.
Oh, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
Julie Giordano, County Executive.
Right, thank
Sorry, thank you. Sorry. Yeah, so I just wanted to mention that we did review the hearing from last year, and we followed the suggestions from this committee to make this a local bill rather than a state bill. We are looking for some guidance on the licensing part of this. So we would like this licensed as a temporary facility, as the setup already kind of mirrors those COMAR regulations. I know that there's some opposition out there. I respectfully disagree with the opposition as there are several inaccuracies with it. But I would also like this committee to know that this is a temporary solution until water and sewer is made available to the Whitehaven area. As you will see on the map, it is part of our master water and sewer plan, so it is coming. And just 2 weeks ago, I was testifying in here for our sanitary district. And so I'm hoping that we will have a favorable outcome. Thank you.
Okay, let's go to Mr. Noor for 2 minutes and then we'll open it up for some question and answer.
Thank you. My name's John Noor. My brother Tom and I own a number of restaurants. We're the largest hospitality employer in Wicomico County, one of the largest on the shore. We're speaking today about our first restaurant we bought in 1996, the Red Roost Restaurant. Around 2012, we deemed this business as wasn't really sustainable anymore. As you all know, many Maryland crab houses have closed around the state, and we wanted to find a solution to keep the restaurant open and sustain its business. So we came up with this idea for a dock bar. We were licensed in 2015. We opened it up on the bank of the Wicomico River. In 2016, we moved it up on the berm above it, and we operated there successfully for 2 years until we ran into some licensing issues. And we've been sort of going a lot of back and forth the last couple of years, as you all know. We too are just looking for a solution. In reading through the current code, we seem to think we shouldn't even be here today because it seems like we are a temporary food service operation. And that's what we were deemed in September of 2016 by the Maryland Health Department. But for some reason, some confusion came in after that. So I just would hope that we could get your support, keep our restaurant open, because right now it would be cheaper for us to close than take the losses the business sustained last year and prior to the bar being open. So just hope we can get after your support.
Okay, let's go to Senator Augustine and Senator Carrozza.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Madam County Executive, you opened the door for it. So I
That's
would just,
okay.
again, like I said, I want to give you the chance to
Yep.
respond because there is opposition to the bill from the Department of Environment and from the Department of Health,
Mhm.
where they talk about 2 initial legal considerations. Perhaps it's in conflict with the Health General article with regard to unclean and unsanitary conditions existing at a restaurant if there lacks the potable water supply. And then it also they also suggested it might conflict with existing Department of Health regulatory authority in this area.
Mhm.
Do you want to
wanna-
respond to that, Madam County Executive?
I sure can, or the owner can.
Well,
Either one. Yeah, sure. No, that's fine. Yep, I will do it. So in response to the Maryland Association for the Health, there are no holding tanks for sewage. So I know that that was brought up, that there was some sort of holding tank for sewage. That is not the case at all. Actually, if you look at your pictures that I put in front of you, you will see the picture of the bar. I wanted you to see actually a visual of what this looks like. That is one of the tanks right there that holds the water. So this is typically just used as a hand washing station. The water is then used as a pump and haul to get the water out of there. So it's actually one of the cleanest mechanisms. Nothing is, no environmental aspects are being affected by this. And so I just wanted to, I think the thing that's really frustrating is that we keep seeing wastewater, sewage water, and that is not the case. Yes, go ahead.
I can elaborate a bit on that. So this is all about 3 hand washing sinks. We have a potable water tank there. There's one in the bar area, one in the kitchen area, and a guest hand washing sink. We have a portable water or potable water tank that's filled from our restaurant every Friday morning. It's taken back to the site, it's hooked up, and the 3 sinks are pumped back to a gray water tank. We only use organic soap there at the request of Josh Hastings on our county council suggested that. This tank only has that. There's some, again, misconceptions. I know the Wicomico Environmental Trust is trying to quote that there's sewage in that. It's 3 hand washing sinks and a 3 compartment sink, which you need by regulation for the health code, but we only use disposables there. We do no ware washing, nothing. So we're talking 3 sinks, organic soap going in there. Every Monday morning, a licensed operator comes and takes the water out of those tanks and disposes of it in a county facility. We keep all records of that. I would say in my time, and not to bring this up, Everybody keeps saying, we'll just put a food truck there. I've actually been to a festival and seen food trucks dump their water into a storm drain. We document everything we do, and it's very clean. We're very transparent there.
So Senator, and to answer your question, there's no objection to the opposition testimony. And what we're suggesting in bringing amendment language is that we've been pursuing going for the food service facility license as a very high bar. This entity does not operate in that form or fashion. It's a very limited, a concession stand type operation, and it really should be applied to one of these, like a mobile food service, or in Comar, there's a special food service facility that is temporary food service. I mean, there's got to be something there to fit, but applying for the higher bar, which is the food service facility permit, of course, you've got to have connected running water. You have to have all these things. Every place, every business that is a food service facility has to have that, but that's not what we're talking about with this entity.
And one point of clarity, there's parts in Comar. This is a semi-permanent fixture. It's built on 3 skids. I could hook something to it and drag it back. It's not on wheels, but it's semi-permanent. And if you read through, it qualifies for what we're doing with the water tank and a gray water tank. It just sort of, there seems to be some disagreement between the agencies on it. And I think we just became victim of that.
Okay, Senator Carrozza.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank the senator and the county executive, Mr. Noor, and I also want to thank our vice chair because she will recall that we spent some time on this last session with Senator Eckert and really trying to find out, where this kind of, exception might fit. And a lot of work has been done since then. A lot of hours with not only this group, but others. And, I also want to thank our counsel, April Morton, because looking at this information that we really didn't have, before, you look at what the exemptions are especially after you see the photos, and you can see that whether this is coming under a temporary food service facilities or semi-permanent food service facilities, that it looks like there would be an exemption for it. My question is, because there has been the opposition testimony raised and some misconceptions, but the issue of drinking water has come up. Can we just clarify that, please?
Yes, on the water, we use bottled water. There's no consumption of any of the water out of the tank. Again, it goes to 3 hand sinks. So it's bottled water. The ice that's used is ice from the main restaurant, which is about a quarter of a mile down the road. This is on the waterfront. So all the ice comes from there. The bottled water is used for consumption when people want it. So there's no consumption at all.
Okay, Senator Washington, did you still have a question?
Going to ask it or not. I'm just reading a letter, your letter from the, first of all, it's nice to see you.
Nice to see you as well.
Welcome to Annapolis. The Wacomico Environmental Trust. And did your county health department weigh in? They sort of raised that there was a discussion.
So our county health department weighed in. Unfortunately, we do not have a county health officer at this time, which is kind of brings us forward to you as well. We're in the process of hiring a new one. So we do have that. I think with the Wacomico Environmental Trust, there's a little bit of concern in my definition of what they say gray water is. And I think that kind of posed a problem last year. Gray water, though, for this is defined as the relatively clean water from baths, sinks, kitchen appliances, but in this case, only sinks for hand washing. And again, the water from the sinks would be pumped to the holding tank, stored, and then used the pump and haul method to remove from the site. So the biggest thing I think for them was the gray water situation. And again, with the idea that there possibly could be sewage or waste in it, but that's not the case here at all.
Right, because they say someone could go from a lavatory, to there without anything in between. So there could be transmission. I think that's what they're raising.
Right.
So address that.
So we have restrooms at our main restaurant that some guests choose to use. We do have some porta potties out there with hand sanitizers, as you would find at any events that you go to. So I don't think that there's actually people depositing any sewage into our hand sinks.
Any additional, any additional questions for either sponsor or the panel? Okay, thank you, Senator Mounts. Yeah,
Chairman, I forgot to thank the committee council for helping us. We'll get to work on this and bring back some ideas.
okay, great. Okay, well, with that, that concludes the bill hearing on Senate Bill 778. We're going to next move to,
Thank you all.
yes, thank you for your
Thank you. It's nice
testimony.
seeing you again.
We have a bill brought in at the request is a Senate Bill 718 from the Maryland Department of Environment. And we've got Tyler Abbott and, oh, I apologize. You know what? Here, you get him. We actually did have somebody signed up unfavorable. I apologize. Mr. Comers, Matt Comers, I apologize, sir. Yeah, we missed you here on the list. And you are signed up unfavorable. Sorry, Senator Mounts, we did have one in-person unfavorable witness signed up, so we're going to get him now. Mr. Comers, you've got 2 minutes, again, unfavorable.
Thank you. I appreciate you. I recognize my name is Matt Cummers. I'm here representing the Maryland Conference of Local Environmental Health Directors, as well as the Maryland Association of County Health Officers. We're here in opposition of this bill as it's written. There are a myriad of issues. Our main concerns lie with potable water, as well as hand washing, adequate hand washing. Any food service facility, that is one of the most essential items that we've got to address, is having clean potable water, consistently available to patrons, as well as the food service facility workers. So it's poor personal hygiene is one of the most typical reasons for foodborne illness. And so it's we're here to just basically voice our concerns about that. We're also concerned about the precedent, even though this is a Wycomico County specific bill. I mean, this type of legislation would absolutely set a very dangerous precedent for the state. And therefore we urge an unfavorable report.
Okay, thank you, sir. Any questions for the witness? Okay, seeing none, that concludes the bill hearing on Senate Bill 778. And now we're going to move to Senate Bill 718. Mr. Abbott, and could I bring up we only have one other witness, Tom Ballantyne, who signed up favor with an amendment. Mr. Ballantyne, why don't you come up? And we're going to start with you, Mr. Abbott, to present Senate Bill 718.
All right. Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, Madam Vice Chair, members of the committee. Thank you for having me here today. My name is Tyler Abbott. I'm the Director of the Land and Materials Administration for Maryland's Department of the Environment, here today on Senate Bill 718, Voluntary Cleanup Program, Determination and Recordation Deadlines. So a little bit of background history. The Voluntary Cleanup Program, also known as the VCP program, was founded back in 1997 to provide state oversight of hazardous material remediation on sites around Maryland. This program allows a succession owner, so somebody who would purchase a property, to be held inculpable for contamination that's found on the site, as more or less an incentive to provide that remediation for the property. There are many facilities, sites across Maryland that are in this program, and it's been a very successful program. The success of the program has also led to many people being involved in the program, as well as the properties getting ever more so ambitious. And so on some of these sites, the documentation that we're looking at has grown to hundreds, if not thousands of pages. And with the timelines that are in the bill, or that are in statute, we have 30 to 45 days to review. And so now this bill, we are asking for 60 days after receipt of the voluntary cleanup program application to be able to review and respond to the applicant. That would be either a approval, denial, give us a little bit more, or a notice of a no further determination. So there's nothing else that needs to be done on this site. This also then allows for 60 days rather than 30 days for the applicant to submit that documentation for recordation at the local jurisdiction. And then finally, also doubles the time from 30 to 60 days for us to review and implement the response action plan. And the response action plan would be if, we determine during your application process, if you need to give us a little bit more and maybe there's additional work that needs to be done at your site. This response action plan is, how are you going to do it? What needs to be done? And on what timeline are you going to do that? There's going to be two amendments submitted to the committee that I've discussed with Tom here on behalf of NIOP. And that'll just be that rather than saying record the determination, it would be provide written evidence that the determination was presented for recordation, because as we know, we can't really determine when that's going to actually get recorded, but we can, take charge in when that is provided to the local jurisdiction. And with that, I won't say any more.
Okay, Mr. Valentine, why don't we take you? I know you signed up favorable with amendment, and then we'll open it up to some questions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Tom Valentine on behalf of NIOP Maryland. We're a commercial real estate trade association, about 700 members statewide that work on commercial, light industrial, mixed use real estate. Our amendment is related to the timing and recording certificates of completion and letters of no further requirements, the final determination. So after the remediation is done, property owner has to record the evidence of that in the land record. We don't have control over how long that takes. We do have control over when we present it. And sometimes it can take longer than the time limits in the bill for the recordation to go final by the local jurisdiction. That happens, the documents are stale, MD has to reissue them. We have to present them again for recordation. So this amendment would avoid that extra loop by providing that the property owner provide a proof that it was presented for recordation.
So are we, just so we're clear, are you all talking about the same language, same amendment?
Yes,
Okay.
same amendment.
Okay, with that, any questions of either of the witness? Okay, seeing none, that concludes the bill hearing on Senate Bill 718.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And we're going to next turn, we have Senator Lamb. Senator Lamb, to come on up here. We've got Senate Bill, first of two Senator Lamb bills. First bill is Senate Bill 512. And I'm going to bring up, got some folks signed up, Hung Chung and Darren Klein. Signed up as part of your sponsor panel. And Senator Lamb, why don't you proceed to present Senate Bill 512?
Sure. So thank you and good afternoon, Chair Feldman, members of the committee, here to present Senate Bill 512 for the record, Clarence Lamb, Senator in District 12. As background, for those who may not be familiar with Legionnaire's disease, it's an illness caused by bacteria that occurs naturally. The difficult part about controlling Legionella, which is the bacteria that causes Legionnaire's in our water system, is that the bacteria can often develop inside the system itself. This means that even if we put clean water in our systems, the water can be contaminated by Legionella by the time that it gets to people's faucets in their homes and businesses. Because it can develop in the water system, it is important that we take preventive steps to ensure water stays clean throughout the distribution network. The ability of Legionella to colonize downstream from water treatment facilities also makes Legionella outbreaks very difficult to predict. Large facilities like nursing homes, hospitals, schools, and large businesses are particularly vulnerable to Legionella. One way to help ensure that our water is safe is to ensure that throughout the distribution system, we've maintained a residual disinfection level throughout the water stream. Currently, water is disinfected centrally at water treatment facilities. However, by the time the water reaches the water system, the disinfectant may have been reduced to an ineffective level. This means that if bacteria enters the water, it will no longer be killed by the disinfectant. What the bill does is requires that a residual level of at least 0.5 milligrams per liter of chlorine be present throughout the water system. We have received feedback that not all water systems in the state use chlorine as their primary disinfectant. So we have an amendment to provide some more flexibility there. We had a meeting with the Department of the Environment, and they expressed a concern that federal water safety rules could prevent water systems from adding enough disinfectant at the water treatment facility to ensure sufficient disinfectant downstream. Our intent is not to over-chlorinate any water. We're trying to strike the right balance between ensuring that regardless of where an individual is located in the water stream, they're receiving a safe and clean water as well as the amount that's needed to be able to properly chlorinate the water. We did receive MDE's suggestion for a new threshold, which we are actively reviewing and certainly open to modifications to the bill in that way. In addition to disinfecting our water, it's important that Marylanders are aware of potential issues that could increase Legionella risk. Disruptions in the water system, which may be due to physical events like pipes bursting or operational changes like changes to water sources, could make it more likely that bacteria finds its way into homes and businesses. Because these disruptive events correlate to greater downstream risk, our bill proposes that water utilities alert users of these events so that health facilities and other sensitive users can be vigilant for any symptoms of Legionella subsequent to an event. Although we think of Legionnaire's disease as an outbreak illness, the U.S. Center for Disease Control data shows that 94% of cases are actually individual and sporadic. That sporadic nature is why we are proposing policy measures directed at prevention, such as upstream measures instead of those that are more directed at downstream remediation efforts that already addressed as part of water that's delivered to certain premises. So in closing, we've certainly appreciated the feedback from MDE, open to further discussions with the department and other stakeholders involved. I think their suggestion for a chlorination level is something we're open to, and certainly open to other amendments as well. With that, let me turn it over to my colleagues here on the sponsor panel. Thank you.
Okay, and tell us your name, and each of you has 2 minutes. You'll see the timer on the board there.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to testify in support of this bill. My name is Dr. Hung Chung. I'm a board certified physician in preventive medicine and internal medicine. I'm also a professor at this University of Pennsylvania School of Medicine and faculty member at the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health. I am the former state medical director for state of Maryland through part of Governor Glendening and Governor Ehrlich's administrations. I am a Maryland resident, and I am also an owner of Cogency, an organization that specializes in investigation and response to waterborne disease cases and outbreaks. I also serve on the board of directors for the Alliance to Prevent Legionnaire's Disease, a national nonprofit dedicated to preventing this waterborne disease. As the senator noted, Legionnaire's disease is caused by waterborne bacteria Legionella. And when we see cases of Legionnaire's disease, it really is a sign of poor water quality in the system. We need to address Legionnaire's disease through better water quality management, as this bill does, and includes ensuring proper treatment of all parts of the distribution system to kill this bacteria. Further, at-risk populations tend to be those who are elderly, immunocompromised, respiratory diseases, or have other comorbidities. And the bill is important in alerting the water users who are at risk for this disease. So this bill is really a common sense bill. It takes the right root cause, and it's probably the most economical way to prevent Legionnaire's disease, which is a very costly disease where the morbidity, people dying, are about 1 in 10 to 1.5 in 10 who come down with this disease. Thank you. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, sir. Why don't you give us your name and got 2 minutes.
Darren Klein. I'm with the Alliance to Prevent Legionnaire's Disease, also board member. I want to thank the senators and Senator Lamb for introducing this bill. I concur with Dr. Chung's testimony in support of the bill requirements, which addresses the root cause of most Legionnaire's disease cases, which Is having disinfectant in the water supply, giving early warning during disruptions to users, as well as other actions that can be taken in the home to prevent exposure. EPA studies, and one recently in the state of New Jersey by the Department of Health, have found that 50% of all household taps tested positive for Legionella. And we're concerned about home-based exposures and the fact that some of the most susceptible individuals are those who are often homebound. Given the fact that Legionella exists in the source water and public water distribution system, it's far more effective to properly treat the water in the public distribution system than address these pathogens after they've entered the home and public places. In summary, we're in support of Senate Bill 512 and that it takes a root cause oriented approach preventing Legionnaire's disease. It's modeled after effective policies that have been put in place in other states like Illinois and Louisiana. And we applaud Maryland for taking a leadership role in pursuing state legislation to effectively reduce cases associated with this serious waterborne disease to improve water quality management. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your testimony. Any questions for either the sponsor or we've got Vice Chair Kagan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator Lamb, thank you as always for all you do for public health, including this bill. And you mentioned that you're open to amendments. I wonder, I'm seeing that both MACO, the Maryland Association of Counties, and MML, the Maryland Municipal League, have pretty strong concerns about this. I wonder whether you've had a chance to meet with them and whether you think you might be able to find common ground or something that you could explain to us.
So I think my office had heard from them. I think they had also spoken with them as well. I think we're open to ways to minimize the cost to our local counties and municipalities. I think this was not intended to generate a large fiscal note in that way. I think part of it is whether there are ways to be able to test and better assess downstream from where some of the large reservoirs and water treatment facilities are, to gauge whether or not there needs to be additional chlorination done closer to the site where end users are actually receiving the water. And that may be a way to be able to scale that back a little bit so that it's, a recognition that there are certain locations that may not be reaching the proper chlorination level because it is literally a pipeline in the stream downstream, but that there are certain locations such as hospitals, maybe nursing care facilities where there is high risk populations that you could really target and focus on those areas that would help bring down the fiscal note and not be quite as large in affecting different municipalities and counties.
Answer. And just a quick follow-up. The 4-hour window was another thing that I think they were concerned about. And we can talk offline if you want about ideas to make sure that consumers and residents, obviously, who might be vulnerable, as you said, get the information they need for their health in a rapid way. Again, trying to balance that to make sure whatever's realistic for getting the word out and what that looks like. So thank you. Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, any additional questions for the panel? Okay, seeing none, turning to, we do have unfavorable from the aforementioned MACO, Dominic Butchko. Dominic, if you could come up here on behalf of MACO, you are signed up unfavorable. Thank you, gentlemen, for your testimony. Yes. Dominic, you know the drill. You've got 2 minutes to tell us why you don't believe this bill should pass.
Yeah, so Mr. Chair, members of the committee, Dominic Butchko with the Maryland Association of Counties. There's actually an organization whose testimony I want to refer you to that's not us. The Maryland Association of Municipal Wastewater Agencies, or MAMWA. They're the group that actually does a lot of this work. And so they pointed out a lot of things that I want to highlight for you. First, Legionella outbreaks typically occur in community facilities as a result of stagnant water and low and hot water temperatures. Increasing the chlorine, leaving a water plant won't help to reduce Legionella because of the factors in the actual building itself. And, water systems can't manage plumbing in private buildings. Maintaining a chlorine level of 0.5 or higher, and the sponsor just mentioned this, that is going to have issues with the federal government and permit violations for disinfectant byproducts that our facilities have to get. Also, the definition of a disruption is incredibly broad, incredibly. And so common and normal operational plant changes, anything from where we're changing pipes or something normal maintenance, we are going to have to notify people on. And it's just not helpful for the amount of regular maintenance and work we do to give the level and the number of notifications that we're going to have to give. I please refer to Mako's written remarks, but also please refer to MAMWA's written remarks. I think they are a lot more helpful for this, and counties and MML urges an unfavorable report. Thank you.
Okay, any questions for Mr. Butchko? Okay, seeing none, that concludes the bill hearing on Senate Bill 512. And Senator Lamb, why don't you come on back up here for Senate Bill 513? And let me call up, you've got two witnesses designated as your sponsor panelists, Alexandra Campbell Ferrari and Stacy Hartwell. If you could both come up here. Senator Lamb, it's all yours. Take the time you need and then we'll go to your panel.
Yeah. I'd like to also ask Luke Wilson to come up as part of the sponsor panel too. I think he's signed up
Okay,
somewhere on that sheet.
I don't see him, but that's fine. You can come up.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, Chair Feldman, members of the committee, here to introduce Senate Bill 513. For the record, Clarence Lamb Center, District 12. So for Senate Bill 513, the primary goal of this bill is to help bring transparency to the state's water and wastewater services, as well as improving the equitable distribution of drinking water and wastewater services. The bill requires water utility companies within the state to provide data on an annual basis to the Department of the Environment and comply with certain reporting requirements. As a result, this bill ensures that MDE develops protocols to report certain drinking water and wastewater data and information. Central to Senate Bill 513 is the creation and maintenance of a statewide open water data reporting platform by the Maryland Department of the Environment that includes certain data and information for each water utility operating in the state. Using this platform, the public can make comments, enabling the inclusion of all Maryland residents in the process. Data included in the platform includes the number of households served by lead service lines in the area, eligibility criteria for offered assistance programs, and the amount of energy used to provide drinking and wastewater services. This data will help consumers better understand the operational costs of their waste and water systems, increase transparency around water shutoffs, improve accountability around water quality, as well as help identify access gaps. We have received a lot of feedback from the stakeholders that the bill is asking for a lot of data. We certainly recognize that as well. Definitely open to suggestions or changes to help bring the data being collected down and understand those concerns and those conversations that we are certainly open to having to help bring the scope of the bill down to a more manageable level. Overall, we would like to ensure that Marylanders have access to transparent data about the quality and cost of their water, regardless of the size of their water provider, but recognize that sometimes this also puts undue burdens on some of the smaller water providers as well. And so open to looking at how we can make that more manageable for those sources as well. Thank you for your consideration. Happy to turn over to other members of the panel.
Do you have a sequence, Senator Lamb, that you prefer or not?
I'll serve them.
Okay.
Good afternoon. My name is Alexandra Campbell Ferrari, and I'm the Executive Director of the Center for Water Security and Cooperation. Thank you, Senator Lamb, for the opportunity to testify in support of this bill. As the co-author of the first ever in-depth study of the laws and policies governing access to water at the local level in Maryland, and the co-creator of the first benchmark to track the laws governing access to water and their impact, I've seen firsthand the lack of available, accessible data on water access and how that lack of data impedes progress in guaranteeing each and every household has and keeps access to water. Senate Bill 513 will achieve three important things: transparency, accountability, and community and utility joint problem solving. First, its bills let us know which households, communities, and utilities are struggling to receive or provide services. The data being collected is typically not made publicly available, which means we do not know how many low-income households are being disconnected from water services, the number and amount of fees they are facing for late and unpaid bills, or whether and how much rate assistance is available. We don't even know basic information about the utility, such as the boundaries of its service areas, the revenue it generates, the costs it incurs, or the volume of water distributed and lost in transit. In order to provide safe and reliable, affordable services, we need easily accessible public data. Second, this bill facilitates accountability. Because water and wastewater access is managed at the local level, there are hundreds of different rules determining how service is provided and managing the relationship between the utility and customer. Data empowers communities, households, and utilities to hold each other accountable. Third, this bill creates the opportunity and the space for households, communities, and utilities to work together to identify the challenges and create solutions. It is difficult to be transparent. However, water and wastewater utilities are some of the most important members of the community, and so are the households whose lives depend on receiving their water and wastewater services. And we need to be open, honest, and transparent about what is needed to keep our water utilities functioning and our households connected. Thank you.
Okay, tell us who you are.
Yes, my name is Luke Wilson. I am the Deputy Director for the Center for Water Security and Cooperation. I'd like to again thank Senator Lamb for proposing this bill and add to my colleague's testimony by addressing the data points that are being collected. The reality is that today, I can't tell you how many people in Maryland are being denied access to water. I can't tell you how many people don't have access today or will lose access tomorrow. I can't tell you because this data isn't there. This bill will place Maryland among the few states in the nation that has the information, the data to solve these problems. Maryland will be uniquely positioned to compete for grants from the federal government and will be able to target funding for systems in crisis. Inflation and climate change are driving the cost of providing water up, and without this data, Maryland will not be prepared. Though there are some utilities that already provide much of this data to their customers, and they should be commended, there are many that don't. By centralizing this data, by providing guidelines for what must be provided, and a consistent, understandable, and accessible form, you protect customers, new and old. You protect home buyers. You protect the voters and taxpayers who are responsible for these utilities. More than anything, you protect utilities and municipalities themselves by increasing community trust, understanding, and confidence through transparency. You also help these utilities to identify their own gaps and areas where they can improve, and you help the state to know where intervention, or more often, assistance is needed. For wastewater, this means that we can stop pollution before it happens. For drinking water, this means we can prevent public health crises before they've caused harm. Of the 55 data points, many are basic information that any city or utility has to know to run their utility, like the costs and revenues of the utility, the water loss, the debt, the number of bills sent, the number of municipalities served, and the map of their service area. Many reflect basic common sense information that should be provided to all customers, like who they can call if their water is shut off, what bill or rate assistance is provided by the utility, and any process to dispute a bill or denial of offered assistance. This bill will let all of us, advocates, government, utilities, and most important customers, see the facts. It will let us see the problems, but most importantly, it will let us see the solutions and to begin to chart a path forward.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Wilson. Next up, Lena.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Chairman Feldman and distinguished committee members. Senator Lamb. My name is Stacy Hartwell. I'm here on behalf of the NAACP Maryland State Conference. I am the chair for the Environmental and Climate Justice Committee. I'm providing this testimony in support of SB 0513, collection and reporting of drinking water and wastewater data and information. Utility insecurity is a major issue for Black and Brown communities as compared to white communities. Over 50% of Black Americans and 45% of Hispanics experience utility insecurity, compared to 25% of white households, with a median of approximately 32% of households. 1 in 3 U.S. households face some form of utility insecurity. 1 in 5 households have reduced or have forewent necessities like food and medicine to pay a utility bill. It is with the above data we are able to identify and track areas of concern and opportunities to support overburdened and underserved communities in line with the tenets of the Justice 40 initiative. Good data is at the root of responsible decision-making. To ensure a just utility system, we must verify policies and practices. We must ensure that they track with reality to benefit the communities that bear the disproportionate impacts of climate change. It is the data that enables us to establish baselines to measure and track the impact of policies and practices, and if we are in alignment with our desired outcomes. Data also helps to forecast and avoid any major issues which may have a negative impact on consumers. An open water data reporting platform enables us to access real-time accurate data, which helps us achieve the goals outlined in the Justice 40 initiative. This bill buttresses the Climate Solutions Now Act by driving the work needed to develop and advance policy to reduce environmental injustices. For the reasons listed above, we strongly urge a favorable report on Senate Bill 0513. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for the sponsor or for any of his sponsor panelists? Senator Washington and then Senator Carozza after that.
Thank you very much. And I do appreciate the expansiveness of the bill. And I also appreciate the sponsors recognition that we might kind of look at it. But what you're laying out is absolutely needed. And you've laid out the challenges in that the way that water that is provided to residents in particular is very local. And so you have water systems that have 5 people on them, and you have water systems that have 200,000 accounts. So are you, because I see this very clearly as you, are there parts of this, or could you let us know parts of this that you think are most urgent? And also if there's some size of systems that you would like to see as a starting place? Or if so either the bill sponsor or anyone open to that, if you could give us some guidance there.
Sure. I think we probably all have opinions on that, so I'll kick us off here. In terms of the type of data, most of it we felt like is already being collected and is well known by the utilities. But for us, one of the focuses is on the access, affordability, and assistance side. So knowing how many people are experiencing water shutoffs, knowing the fees, knowing the availability of assistance programs, that should be available data for all. The second side to that is the utility finances. What is commonly said is that utilities don't have the financial resources to offer assistance programs, and that they're struggling in terms of providing safe and reliable and affordable water. And so for me, we need to open up and shed some light on what those two sides of the coin are. In terms of the size of utilities, I know there's been some conversation about reducing it to the major utilities that provide the services to somewhat like 95% of the population. And I am okay with that, except that I always feel like the small utilities get left out of the equation, in large part because it's always felt like the burden is much higher on them, even though they're serving a much smaller population. So I would urge us to find ways to incorporate them into this and to protect them and make sure that data is collected to include them. But I would say if there's something like a phased system where maybe they have to comply and participate and provide the data within 3 years or 2 years instead of 1 year. Something like that gives them some time to get prepared. I understand.
Yes, I'd like to hear you, and then I have a follow-up.
All right, from the perspective of the NAACP, especially with the advent of us being able to build policy around climate solutions now and using, an equity lens on this, we have to be able to track this. We have to know if there are communities in peril, if there are even pockets of places which are typical, they're typically Black and brown and rural communities. We need to be able to track this data, and we have to be able to be accountable to our constituency around the delivery of their services. So for us, it's like large and small. And the good thing in the age of computers, it is literally, most people are standardized around, some simple software. So I think that the data is readily available. So it would be easy to share. It would just be a matter of us, compiling it and putting it in a system where we have access to it. So.
Okay. I mean, yeah.
My follow-up question, I guess, is to the bill sponsor, or anyone who would know that you have the department, which department is collecting it?
MDE would be collected.
And is that not something that MDE does?
No.
In other words, within MDE, is there a water division that focuses at all on residential water accounts?
I believe there is a water division, but I don't believe they collect this information right now as part of residential water accounts.
much of the water has been driven by the Clean Water Act, so we sort of need a reinterpretation of the Clean Water Act, which is actually what you're talking about. And so there really needs to be another thing. But I look forward to working with all of you.
Yeah, and the
on this.
Clean Water Act does require the state to have a designee to go through the permitting and enforcement pieces of the Clean Water Act, and that is not MSD, MDE rather.
Right,
MDE.
so there's probably a vehicle, we just have to
Yeah.
figure it out. All right, thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, Senator Carosa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think we can all agree that the data from this can be very helpful to us. So I think we start there. But I think what's most concerning about this is when you roll out something like this, and I know that the Senator Lamb, and you've already mentioned how you can rein it in, but you go forward with a proposal where even MDE is, kind of sending the, concerns about how, broad this is. There are 3,000 known small water utilities in the state. And, you've got especially the small ones. And was there any effort before kind of rolling out something this expansive that would cause, especially the smaller municipalities and these, smaller municipal water providers and even the munis to consult with MML to, even go into if I knew something like this was coming, I'd probably go into one of my smaller ones and just even find out what's even doable just to start. And instead, what happens, you come out with a bill and then at the first hearing you already talk about. And so I'm just wondering was there any effort to consult on the early end to maybe just make it a little bit more manageable before you even come in?
Yeah, we did reach out to MDE and we did have a conversation with them and also some follow-up as well. I think the challenge is that, and you kind of touch on this too, is that a lot of the systems are all across the spectrum, right? We have some folks that are water suppliers that are really, really large, and they have some robust systems in place for accounting and billing and invoicing, et cetera. There are some that are very, very small. And so, it became very difficult to be able to get a complete picture of where all of them are. But we recognize that there's a spectrum of level of record keeping and invoicing and number of customers that are served by these various water suppliers that, and that's why I think we're open to drawing the line somewhere when it comes to starting with, kind of as you cite, the importance of having some of this information in a scaled back form for some of the larger suppliers potentially.
Appreciate that. 5-page reporting from these really small ones. And I'm very sensitive to this. I have 11 municipalities in my district, but they range from, those like Salisbury and Ocean City that this might be readily available to really small ones like Princess Anne and, Del Mar. So I just think you said you consulted with MDE, but I'm just wondering, on the early end, sometimes we'd be in a better position to see what's doable and ask that maybe you consult with them in the future.
Okay, ma'am, do you want to take a shot at that?
Just to
Okay.
add something. So in our work, Luke and I work with a large variety of utilities and community groups. So we have experience in working and understanding utility operations from large scale utilities all the way down to small scale utilities. In fact, we are about to launch a water utility leadership fellowship. So we actually work with both sides of this. And we are from the majority of this data are things that they have to know in order to operate their facility. The only question is whether it's putting it onto a form and reporting it to a different individual. But most of these, in terms of their financing, their budget, how much water they distribute, all of these are things they have to know in order to operate as a water and wastewater utility. There are a few things that we do know that are a little bit potentially beyond their scope of understanding or their scope of information. For example, oftentimes utilities do not know how many of their customers are low income. And that's a problem for us, but we recognize that they don't necessarily have that information, but the local government might. But I will emphasize that in order to operate their utilities, they have to know the majority of this information. It's just a question of providing it to a different person.
Okay, I mean, okay, we don't have to keep going on. I mean, do you want anything additive, something?
It is additive.
Okay, then absolutely.
And you know, Maryland has been engaged in identifying communities or environmental justice communities. And we have maps and overlays to really give us indications as to areas where we're focused. And it would be a simple zip code sort for us to be able to determine which of these communities fall in the areas that are designated under like Climate Solutions Now, or that we might be focused on for the geez, I just forgot that quickly. For the Justice 40 initiative.
Okay, any additional questions for the panel? Okay, seeing none, we do have one virtual witness signed up favorable. I want to get that person, Gabriel Watson, in, and then we'll go to the one unfavorable in person. So Mr. Watson, I see you. You're signed up favorable, and you're going to have 2 minutes to submit your testimony.
Good afternoon. Thank you to the committee, chair, vice chair, and Senator Lamb. My name is Gabriel Watson, and I represent the Environmental Policy Innovation Center, or EPIC. We are in favor of the bill without amendments. Our mission at EPIC is to build policies that speed up environmental outcomes. My work as the manager of data science and applications focuses on where agencies can quickly use technology and data to advance climate resilience and equitable environmental solutions. SB 513 solves the problem of data availability for drinking and wastewater in Maryland, opening the door for equitable infrastructure and climate resiliency. In our work developing the nation's first provisional service area boundary data set, we've learned there are many uses for accurate and accessible service area boundary data. Some relevant applications of this data include assessing and responding to climate change variability and funding prioritization and allocation based on who lacks access to safe, reliable drinking water. This bill is great for Maryland. Despite the importance of water for health, safety, and overall well-being, Marylanders shouldn't have to wonder who is responsible for my water. We should know. When the bill is enacted, Maryland will join 17 states and the District of Columbia in publicly sharing data that supports national clean water goals and presents cascading long-term benefits for both water management and public health. While EPIC supports the bill without amendments, we have a few recommendations. First, we encourage the use of fair data standards such as digital maps and connections to existing data portals, allowing the public to more easily make sense of the information. Second, while we applaud the foresight in allocating funding to the Department of Environment to implement this bill, we want to raise capacity concerns. To make compliance easier and still serve public health goals, consider reducing the frequency of information requests for water utilities and creating positions within the Department of the Environment to support the effort. While this may feel like a monumental effort, we believe that having this data showing where one water system begins and another ends is the foundation of smart and equitable management and planning. Thank you for your time and allowing me to testify on this measure on behalf of EPIC.
Okay, any questions for Mr. Watson? Okay, seeing none, we're going to now bring up our lone unfavorable in-person witness, Dominic Bochco from Maryland Association of Counties. Dominic, why don't you come up, and you've got 2 minutes to submit your unfavorable testimony.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, Dominic Bochco with the Maryland Association of Counties. Similar to my last statement, I would like to refer you to Mako's written testimony, but also, again, the Maryland Association of Municipal Wastewater Agencies, or MAMWAs, who are the people who do this work. So this bill, I think the intent is good, but the way to go about it is completely wrong. 55 data points is quite extensive, and most of them actually counties don't have access to, or are wastewater people. For example, it lists the number of vacant homes in a service area. We would literally have to send our crews out knocking door to door to find that. Some of this information is duplicative and already sent to MDE as it is. And also there's questions just about how this information would help the public interest, such as the amount of energy used to produce our water and wastewater. I also want to highlight too that we've heard from nearly everyone that we would have to hire more staff to actually comply with this report, 1 to multiple positions. And I want to point to an example in Frederick County for a minute. So I went on a tour of one of these wastewater facilities in September, and as of now, they have such a difficult time hiring people. They have minimal levels of engineers, administrative staff, et cetera. And this isn't a Frederick County issue. This is a national issue as far as water infrastructure goes. And so we have these facilities that are already having a difficult time bringing in and retaining people. And yet we're going to put this excessive reporting burden on them for an outcome that I'm not entirely sure of. So we're going to waste resources for what? Again, I would refer you to MAMWA, who are the people actually doing this, who are vehemently opposed. MACO urges an unfavorable report. Thank you.
Okay, any questions for our witness? Senator Carrozza.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be brief. Were you consulted about this bill?
No.
Any additional questions for the witness? Okay, seeing none, that concludes bill hearing on Senate Bill 513. We're going to next move to the birthday girl by one day, Senator Klausmeyer, back to present Senate Bill 531. Welcome back after spending many hours with us last night.
Groundhog Day.
And I'm going to bring up your three sponsor panelists,
Okay.
Alexandra Shaw, Ricardo Hall, and Barry Suits are your three witnesses. All I'm going to take the seat at the table. And Senator Klausmeyer, why don't you start?
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Vice Chair. Senate Bill 531, Public Water Systems Supplier Requirements, and it is called the Water Safety and Cybersecurity Act of 2023. Senate Bill 531 is intended to help ensure all Marylanders have access to safe, affordable, reliable water service. Fortunately, most of us do not need to think twice about the water that we drink. However, decades of underinvestment, mismanagement, and/or neglect have run some systems into the ground. While there is no silver bullet to solve this issue, I think there is something we can do as lawmakers to prevent systems from digging themselves into this hole. The Water Safety and Security Act is designed to put basic operational standards in place to ensure systems are being maintained and are planning for the future. I'll provide a brief rundown on what's in Senate Bill 531. I am also joined by several experts here to support the bill. First, the bill establishes a cybersecurity program. This would just apply to systems that have internet-based controls to ensure they can't be tampered with remotely. It's been suggested that this requirement be extended 1 year, which I think would be a reasonable change. It also requires the creation of an asset management plan. I think every system should have a plan for maintaining and replacing infrastructure, so it's not run into the ground after decades of inaction and poor planning. Third, the bill requires that if a water supplier receives several violation notices from MDE, they must submit a mitigation plan. If a system gets a notice for non-compliance, they should have a plan for fixing the problem. Fourth, Senate Bill 531 establishes a valve and hydrant inspection program. This is another basic maintenance requirement to ensure the system is properly working. For systems that provide fire protection, it's important that the hydrants work when they are needed. And finally, the bill requires an annual compliance report. This would simply require the system to submit an annual report to MDE certifying that they are complying with these requirements. I also want the committee to be aware of the sponsor amendment that should be in your packet, which strips the provision relating to when a provider can receive public funding. Hopefully, this amendment will ease some of the concerns you may hear. I appreciate the committee's time and consideration of this issue and look forward to working with you on this bill.
Okay, thank you, Senator
Thank you.
Klausmeyer. Who would you like to go next?
You want to go?
Okay, why don't you pass that on? Tell us your name and you got 2 minutes.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, Alex Shaw with Compass Government Relations here today to testify in favor of Senate Bill 531. Thank you to Senator Klausmeyer for running with this issue. I think that we've all heard a lot already today about water and the vulnerabilities of water if not properly maintained. And we believe that Senate Bill 531 is another step in the right direction to make sure that systems are protected and that Marylanders have access to safe, reliable, sustainable drinking water. I just want to point out a couple of aspects of the bill. The senator did a really great job laying out all the different aspects, but I'd like to point to a couple. The first is cybersecurity. So I think when we think of cyber attacks, we don't first and foremost think of water. We often think of banks or an online retailer or maybe healthcare data, something like that. But water is not immune to that. And if a water system that does have controls connected to the internet were to get hacked, that would be a real issue for the communities that it services. So we think that the cybersecurity portion of this bill is a really important aspect that's not always considered. Also, the senator mentioned there's an asset management plan in the bill. This just says that, folks should know what their infrastructure looks like. You should have a plan on how to maintain and or replace any sort of aging infrastructure. And it really ensures that water utilities, water systems are kind of ahead of the game and being proactive rather than reactive. And I also wanted to mention the sponsor amendment that the senator mentioned. So that does strip the provision at the very end. It's section 9-437 on page 10 that has to do with restricting funds from systems that don't comply. So we're taking that out to deal with some concerns that we've heard in the past. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Alec. We'll go through the whole panel. Sir, either one of you can start and tell us your name and then 2 minutes.
Members of the committee, my name is Rick Hall. I'm Chief Operating Officer of the National Association of Water Companies. Thank you for allowing me to testify today. I applaud the senator for introducing Senate Bill 531. I believe it's critical for protecting the public health throughout Maryland. And at NAWC, we've done a lot of work recently addressing water equity issues around the country. In two of those, we've developed principles of water equity. We think two are really relevant today. The first is that everyone deserves water that's safe, reliable, and affordable. Second is that customers must continue to be the top priority for water providers, regulators, and lawmakers. As a nation, we must advance programs that promote water equity to ensure that customers of all income levels and all geographic locations have access to high quality water. There's a crisis of confidence in tap water in this country. A 2020 survey put the number of Americans that don't trust the water coming out of their taps at 40%. A more recent survey in 2022 by the Environmental Working Group put that number at 51%. So over half of the people surveyed don't trust the water coming out of their tap. Recent studies have shown that low-income and minority communities are much more likely than white and affluent communities to not trust their tap water. This means that Marylanders who are least able to afford bottled water, which is most often used to replace tap water, and which costs approximately 200 times tap water, are much more likely to use as an alternative. This adds incredible expense to household budgets and is also very harmful to the environment, particularly environments as dependent on waterways as this state is. So what exactly does water safety and security means? I think another way to frame it would be a water consumer's bill of rights. I think we could all agree that all Marylanders have a right to well-functioning water infrastructure, have a right to critical facilities protected, have a right to a water supplier that takes necessary steps to protect against cyber threats, and have a right to a water system that addresses drinking water quality violations in a timely and efficient manner. For these reasons, I encourage support of the bill.
Okay, thank you, sir. Why don't you pass that to your right? And again, tell us your name.
My name is Barry Suits. I'm representing Maryland American Water, and we provide service to the town of Bel Air, Maryland. Chairman Feldman, committee members, I appreciate the opportunity to present before you today. I'd refer you to my written testimony. I won't rehash some of the important points that were just made by the prior folks, but wanted to thank Senator Clausmeyer for raising this issue. I've been in the water and wastewater business for over 30 years. I'm a registered professional engineer. So I've been doing this a while. It's hard to believe. Speaking of the cybersecurity, I'll touch on that just briefly. We had no electronic control of equipment that was accessible by internet. Now it's pretty much everywhere. So things have changed dramatically in just my time in the business. And that's one of the reasons I believe that's a really important component of this bill. The other thing that I'll touch on that we haven't said too much about is the transparency issue. We heard a little bit about that earlier, but customers deserve to know what's going on with their water and wastewater system. We know that, we see that with our own customers, and we believe this bill will provide folks with the opportunity to see, are their water providers doing the kind of what we call table stakes sometimes, the basic elements of what's necessary to run a good water system. So with that, I urge favorable report on Senate Bill 531. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir. Any questions for Senator Klausmeyer? Okay, we've got Senator Watson and then Senator Washington.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to ask Mr. Suits a question. So the company you're with again, what's it called?
Maryland American Water.
And so the town of Bel Air has privatized their water?
Yeah, we've been their water provider for about 90 years now. And we serve about 20,000 people there, a little over 5,000 connections.
And so you privatized the water. So is that a statement that the Department of Environment does not do an adequate job with the water?
No, absolutely not. We comply with and rely on the Department of Environment for regulation of water quality. What I would suggest is there's not as much ability, we heard that in an earlier bill, for folks to see how is their system performing on the basic pieces of running a water utility. For instance, this bill includes fire hydrant maintenance and valve maintenance. Fire hydrant maintenance, we're very clear on why that's important. You're half of the need to protect your home from a fire is the water that comes out of a hydrant. The other is the firemen that use it. And critical valves, if you look in the bill, those critical valves are identified as valves around nursing homes, hospitals, some of what we heard earlier today. And there aren't specific requirements by MDE on that, but there are recommendations by the American Water Works Association on best practices, and these are completely in alignment with those.
So why wouldn't we levy those requirements on the Department of Environment versus privatizing a water system?
Oh, this bill has nothing to do with privatizing the water system. I'm sorry. This bill is the bulk of Marylanders are served by public systems. This bill does nothing to change whether a system is run by a private company like the one I work for, or run by the city or county that manages the water system. So we just happen to be a private water supply in the town of Maryland, but this bill really is effectively the same for all water utilities, regardless of whether you're private or public.
Okay, thank you.
Senator Washington.
Thank you. And thank you so much, Senator, for bringing this bill and raising the issue of infrastructure related to our water supply system. This is really very, very important. Thank you. And then also, thank you for your national. Has this legislation been passed in other states? Let's just say that I support in concept where we want to go with this, but is this currently this model legislation that has been enacted in other states?
I can address that. Mr. Hall may be better, but yes, if it were passed in Maryland, I think we would be about the 8th state nationally to pass something very similar. A few of those states have passed the cyber piece and not the asset management piece, but the majority have passed both of those 8.
And what state?
So the ones I'm aware of, New Jersey has passed it, Indiana has passed it, Pennsylvania is considering it. It was passed out of their Senate last year, and I think it's being considered again this year. Tennessee has the cyber piece. I probably missed a couple. Missouri has, and Illinois have it.
Yeah. And it's being currently considered in Mississippi right now in reaction to, or I shouldn't say in reaction, but in effort to, when EPA, everyone I think is aware of EPA's role in Jackson right now to rehabilitate that system. The policymakers in Mississippi are rightfully looking, okay, what happens after EPA leaves town? And so they're considering a very similar piece of legislation to address that.
Thank you. And then there's a component of the bill that is excluding Baltimore City and a couple of other. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, I think I'll take a stab at that. This is a bill, a similar form of this bill was presented the year COVID hit. And during that process, some of the feedback we got from the larger two utilities, WSSC and Baltimore City, was that they're already, kind of doing these things. They're already, have more stringent regulation. And there's truth to both of those. Now, sometimes you read in the news, maybe something looks different, but the reality is even MDE and the EPA have more stringent requirements on the largest of water providers than they do on the smallest. And so, the reason for that, that exemption was really to address the fact that they do have some other requirements that are, at a greater level than these kind of mid-range ones that we've targeted here.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any additional questions for the panel? Okay, seeing none, we do have two witnesses signed up unfavorable from MML and from MACO. We've got Justin Fiore signed up from Maryland Municipal League and Dominic Butchko from MACO. Why don't you both make your way up to the witness table? And you both have signed up again unfavorable, and you've got 2 minutes each. So why don't you start, Justin? We haven't heard from you in a while.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair, Madam Vice Chair, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Justin Fiore, here on behalf of the Maryland Municipal League in strong opposition to Senate Bill 531. Everyone here now has served long enough. You have a hearing or two that's stuck with you forever. You will always remember that hearing, right? Well, last time this bill was introduced, I will never forget the hearing we had in the House. I went up and I explained how this bill would have incredible costs to local governments. Some of it's unnecessary. The administrative burden is absurd. I don't understand the bill. Shortly after that, another advocate came up on behalf of, let's see here, the Food and Water Action Organization. And they explained what this bill is really about. This is a privatization bill. They're seeking to take public water companies, privatize them by expanding the burden, cutting out public funding. So while they now have a friendly amendment to exclude that, that's what's going on here. And to that point, she provided a quote. Now, this was a quote at the time from then President and CEO of American Water, told investors that we work with state legislators and regulators to come up with rulemaking and legislation that enables these acquisitions to happen. We've been very successful for a decade at doing this. This public policy, the really three areas that have helped us grow: fair market value legislation, consolidation tariffs, and then the emerging legislation around the Water Quality Accountability Act. That's what this bill is. It's the national model for it. We would ask you to provide a favor or an unfavorable report on Senate Bill 531.
Okay, Dominic.
Dominic Butchko, Maryland Association of Counties. Ditto. Justin said that very well.
Okay. Any questions for our two witnesses? We've got Senator Washington.
Thank you. Yeah, because I was looking at in the bill that there are two sections reserved, 9-427 and 9-428. So I was going to ask what those will reserve for. So I'd be interested maybe if you can find out what has been added there later on those sections. And then so as my colleague asked that question earlier, I think we all sort of understand how this can be used in that way. But can I ask you just in general, would it be helpful for us to have the state of Maryland, have an understanding of the infrastructure needs in our water system? So not in this kind of punitive way that we have here. And the prior bill as well, there's components of it that should we have a view of our overall water system, its safety, its accessibility, because right now we don't have a lot of state support for our local systems. But I think we maybe need to look in that direction.
Yeah, thank you very much for the question, Senator. I think you're right. I'm sure MACO and I would be happy to work with MAMSWA and our counterparts that are, as he mentioned earlier, on other bills, doing this every day and figuring out what we can come up with. We absolutely would love to work with this committee on that.
Yeah, I think we should, Mr. Chair, I do think we should figure out something this year to start to work on. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions for the panel? Okay, seeing none, that concludes the bill hearing on Senate Bill 531, and we will now move on to Senator Jackson, Senate Bill 743. And Senator Jackson, I'm going to bring up your sponsor panel of Stacy Hartwell, Rebecca Rare, and Sandra Lobus. One other witness, Caitlin Schmidt. Those four, okay, we've got the foursome. Senator Jackson, whenever you're ready, feel free to proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members of the committee. For the record, Senator Michael Jackson, on behalf of Senate Bill 743. This is a piece of legislation designed to require state agencies to take better account of their actions in relation to climate, labor, employment, and environmental justice policies in overburdened communities, one of which I live, Brandywine, Maryland. This bill improves Maryland's permitting process when it comes to building and improves the process when it comes to building industrial factories, wastewater treatment facilities, highways, mining operations, power plants, and other potentially dangerous projects by doing a few things. It ensures the key state agencies in Maryland are held accountable for reporting to the state's climate, environmental justice, and labor goals. It requires thorough planning, evaluation, reporting, and mitigation of negative impacts on underserved and overburdened communities before operations are permitted to begin on meaningful projects. That means more public input. It fosters measurable communication before the Maryland Department of the environmental permit applicants in underserved and overburdened communities, and it allows Marylanders to receive regular notifications regarding environmental permits that may have a negative impact on our health and well-being. And there's unbelievable disparity in health around such facilities. This legislation is very straightforward, is a straightforward attempt to ensure that all Maryland communities receive the necessary oversight actions to ensure the environmental safety and protection of their communities. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, we ask for a favorable report, and what you'll see, you should also have some clarifying amendments which will be expounded upon by my panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Jackson. Why don't you let Ms. Hartwell go next, and then we'll go down the aisle.
Good afternoon again. For the record, I am Stacy Hartwell, Chair of the Environmental and Climate Justice Committee of the NAACP Maryland State Conference. We support Senate Bill 0743, which requires Maryland policymakers to evaluate the climate equity implications of proposed policy changes. One of the NAACP Environmental and Climate Justice's committee's primary goals is to advocate for increasing the livability of communities while also strengthening their resilience. 743 would be a powerful tool for achieving exactly that. It will also serve as a cornerstone for implementing policy for the Climate Solutions Now Act. This legislation is a meaningful step towards addressing one of the most insidious and entrenched forms of systemic racism. Across Maryland, Black and Brown communities disproportionately suffer from pollutants and other environmental harm poisoned by their own air, soil, and water. In Baltimore, a city that's 65% Black, as many as 130 residents per 100,000 die every year from the consequences of air pollution alone. Despite this, the renewable energy company, Energy Answers, is attempting to build a garbage incinerator that would emit 1,000 pounds of lead and 250 pounds of mercury into the air of the Curtis Bay neighborhood, which remains largely segregated. This legislation will prevent us from adding insult to injury. Baltimore is not the only place that is harmed. However, across Maryland, communities adjacent to industrial sites such as Lothian and Anne Arundel County are turned into sacrifice zones, places with severe and potentially irreversible pollution and even greater negative health impacts. In Lothian, which is disproportionately Black and poor, mining sites fill the air with diesel exhaust and dust while toxic cadmium leaches into the soil and water. This legislation will require Maryland governments within to consider the potential for undue harm caused by any policy change. To help make the Justice 40 initiative a reality and to achieve the goals outlined in the Climate Solutions Now Act, we request a favorable report on Senate Bill 743. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Why don't we go down, whoever wants to grab the mic first.
I will be providing translation for Ms. Lobos.
Okay, sounds good.
Hola, buenas tardes, comité. Mi nombre es Sandra Lobo. Soy residente de la ciudad de Baltimore por 20 años. Inmigré con mi familia de El Salvador después de los terremotos del 2001. Abrimos un restaurante y compramos casas en el vecindario de Brooklyn. Mis vecinos son personas trabajadoras y muchos son hispanos e inmigrantes.
My name is Sandra Lobos. I'm a resident of South Baltimore City. I immigrated 20 years ago with my family from El Salvador after the 2001 earthquakes. We opened a restaurant and bought houses in Brooklyn, in the Brooklyn neighborhood of Baltimore. My neighbors are hardworking people and many are Hispanic and immigrant.
Como madre me preocupo por la educación de mis hijos, la seguridad de mi vecindario y teniendo suficientes ingresos para cubrir nuestros gastos. Pero lo que no me esperaba preocuparme era por la calidad de nuestro medio ambiente y cómo ha impactado la salud de mi familia.
As a mother, I care about my children's education, the safety of my neighborhood, and having enough income to cover our expenses. But what I did not expect to worry about was the quality of our environment and how it has impacted my family's health.
Según la base de datos ambientales de Maryland, mi vecindario tiene una puntuación de 0.95 de exposición ambiental, es decir, una de las puntuaciones más altas en Maryland, expuestos a un ambiente tóxico.
According to the Maryland Environmental Database, my neighborhood has an environmental exposure score of 0.95 out of 1. That is to say, one of the highest scores in Maryland exposed to a toxic environment.
Esas puntuaciones son más que números, son las vidas de nuestros seres queridos. Cuando estaba embarazada de mi hijo, no sabía que el aire que estaba afectando y nació con hipertensión pulmonar. Como cualquier madre teniendo ganas de llevarme a mi hijo al nacer, pero tuvo que quedarse un mes en el hospital recibiendo tratamiento crítico para respirar y ahora sigue viviendo con asma, necesitando tomar medicamento diariamente para no sufrir un ataque de asma.
Those scores are more than just numbers. They are the lives of our loved ones. When I was pregnant with my son, I didn't know the effects of breathing in toxins. My son was born with pulmonary hypertension. Like any mother, I wanted to take my son home after he was born, but he had to stay in the hospital for a month after receiving critical treatment in order to breathe, and now he continues to live with asthma, taking medication daily.
Por eso levanto mi voz hoy para pedir un voto favorable a nuestras comunidades. No deben de seguir siendo sacrificadas para que industrias contaminantes puedan hacer sus negocios sin tomar en cuenta la salud de nuestra familia, de nuestros hijos. Nuestro derecho a la vida es un ambiente saludable. Vale más que dejar los negocios operar donde sea. Comunidades como la mía necesitamos justicia climática ahora. Gracias por darme la oportunidad de compartir mi testimonio.
That's why I'm raising my voice today to call for a favorable vote. Communities that have had to bear the consequences of a toxic environment should have the power to limit our exposure to polluting industries. Our communities must not continue to be sacrificed so that polluting industries can do their business without taking the health of our children into account. Our right to life, to a healthy environment is worth more than letting businesses operate anywhere they please. Communities like mine need climate justice now. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to share my testimony.
Okay, thank you for your testimony. Why don't you pass that on?
Thank you for your indulgence.
And
Mr.
put that mic close to you. And while we're there, we do have the other, I know we have the other sponsor panelists. Why don't you come up here as well? Rebecca, why don't you go next? And then we'll go to Caitlin Schmidt.
Thanks. Good afternoon, Chair Feldman, Vice Chair Kagan, and members of the committee. My name is Rebecca Rear, and I am the Director of Climate Policy and Justice with the Maryland League of Conservation Voters. Maryland LCV supports SB 743, the Climate, Labor, and Environmental Equity Act, and we thank Senator Jackson for sponsoring this important bill. Maryland LCV is committed to addressing environmental injustices in the state. SB 743 does this by taking a more comprehensive look at the way facilities are permitted to try to ensure there is not undue burden or harm from that facility. I'm also a member of the Maryland Public Health Association and would like to express their support for the bill. I think you can find their testimony in the bill file. And actually, health is a good way to look at this bill. You can think about the Climate, Labor, and Environmental Equity Act sort of like a checkup with your primary care physician. As the saying goes, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. When we see our physician, they often ask us about our health status and any underlying conditions. The screening questions put forward through this bill are, to inform the next course of action or treatment. So that's really what this bill is doing for a community, like your primary care physician does for you. What's going on around you? What do you do every day? What's going on? That'll inform the next step. And so whether that's medication for you or more diet and exercise, or for a community, maybe it's an alteration to a permit to make sure there isn't that undue harm. When we make sure underserved communities are not also overburdened by pollution, we're working to prevent environmental degradation and public health harm to those communities. This approach will save us in the long save us in long-term costs associated with health harms and environmental degradation, and benefit the economy overall by providing safer jobs in communities. The same way we save by paying for a preventive care visit rather than years of treatment after getting sick. We appreciate your time today and urge a favorable report. Thank you so much.
Okay, Ms. Schmidt, you're going to be final witness on the sponsor panel.
Hi there, Caitlin Schmidt. I am a senior policy analyst at the Center for Progressive Reform. We are a member organization of 60 member scholars who are law professors across the country working on social, environmental, and public health issues. We are here today in support of Senate Bill 743. What the bill does in a nutshell, it does four things. It does ensure that key state agencies in Maryland are held accountable simply through annual reporting to the state's climate, environmental justice, and labor goals. Secondly, it requires more thorough planning, reporting, and mitigation of negative impacts, specifically to underserved and overburdened communities, which we codified in law last year under the Climate Solutions Now Act. Third, it would foster measurable communication between the Maryland Department of the Environment, environmental permit applicants, and underserved and overburdened communities. And lastly, it would allow all Marylanders to receive regular notifications regarding environmental permits that may have a negative impact on their health and well-being. At least 11 other states consider the social and economic impacts of environmental projects to address environmental justice head-on in their states. New Jersey has a law in place most closely aligned with this bill. And so I will reserve the rest of my time just to address some of the clarifying amendments that were made. There's quite a few, but for instance, they're very simple. So in terms of the annual reporting provisions, we added the Commission on Sustainable Communities and Climate Justice, as well as the Commission on Climate Change, granted that environmental justice would be reported on. There was another piece regarding measurable communication and engagement. We wanted to ensure that language was clarified in the bill, and then ensure that MDE is actively soliciting feedback from communities that are most impacted. So I will end it there, and I urge a favorable support of the bill. Thank you.
Okay, any questions for the sponsor or his panel? We've got Vice Chair Kagan.
Mr. Chair, Senator Jackson, thank you for the bill. Thank you for great witnesses, and you have a lot of wonderful endorsements and testimony in support of the bill. I'm noting that none of our wonderful new governor's departments seem to have weighed in. And I wonder whether you have talked to them, heard from them, because EJ, environmental justice, just seems like so in the lane, and they talked about it in this committee. I'm a little surprised that they didn't submit testimony. I wonder if you could explain to us why that might be.
The short answer is no. But I actually had a meeting scheduled with the acting secretary, and that actually got postponed for, I do intend to follow up on that. So I have the same sentiment as you do on that, so.
Administration is watching. They can follow up with Senator Jackson and also fill the committee in on your thoughts on this bill. Thank you. Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Augustine, then we'll go to Senator Carozza.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will just in all fairness, that it looks like the Maryland Department of the Environment did submit a letter of information. And I was looking at that letter of information. In that letter of information, they talked about sharing the goals for that, but that there probably was need of some work. And they also suggest in here that they may have been working working on some clarifying things within that, but that environmental justice is important. So are you open to working with them to get this thing right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And again, just to clarify my response, our meeting was canceled. There's certainly some interest within this bill, as well as some other environmental interests that I have that were going to be a part of my conversation with the new secretary. As I've also had offline conversations with the chair of this committee regarding some of these matters as well, in particular decommissioning and of some of our power plants and others. So yes, absolutely. And we are amenable to the wishes of the committee, obviously, as well as making sure we come in with a collaborative product for you. So thank you.
Okay, Vice Chair Kagan, then we'll go to Senator Carozza and then Senator Watson.
Thank you, Senator Augustine. And I just want to apologize to Secretary McElwain and her team then. There's 67 pages of testimony. And so I was scrolling and there's so much favorable. I didn't go down as far as the information. So thank you to the leadership and look forward to hearing about the consensus that you're able to build with her and with them. Thank you.
Okay, Senator Carozza, and then we'll go over to Senator Watson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Senator Jackson. Just trying to I'm looking at the fiscal note and the bill and just trying to make sure I understand the bill. The fiscal note goes through and says requiring MDE to conduct the climate and environmental equity evaluation of a permit application after conducting the EJ, I guess that's environmental justice score review required under current law. MDE determines that issuing an approval for a permit may impact an underserved community or an overburdened community, which I think obviously clarification of those two terms would be important. But then it goes on to say, and this is my question, the evaluation may include an analysis of several specified items. And then I guess I'm trying to figure out what are those specified items, and I'm sorry if I haven't matched the bill language with the fiscal note. And would that include overturning a local decision, or just I guess I'm trying to figure out what happens on the local end, what happens after the state does the review, and if there are issues that have to be worked through. Is there a process that you can work through issues maybe without being punitive?
So what the bill does is it expands the type of evaluation that MDE can conduct. It doesn't mandate that they have to look at the 8 specific factors that are outlined in the bill. So these factors were actually taken from EPA's environmental justice and air permitting principles. It is something that the EPA recommends that any state agency conduct an additional sort of evaluation when a community that is overburdened or underserved is going to be impacted by an environmental permit. So those are listed on page 5. I can run through them if you want me to. But they include the demographic data of the affected community, including potential vulnerabilities, existing environmental and climate data regarding the affected community, the applicant's facility's potential contribution to greenhouse gas emissions, the compliance record of the facility, existing public health data regarding the affected community, potential chemical and non-chemical stressors, the cumulative impact of pollution in the affected community, et cetera. So it goes on. And again, if you'll notice in B, it says the climate and environmental equity evaluation required in this section may include. So that signifies that these are essentially, it's enabling legislation to allow the agency to look at sort of real world impacts that may be beyond the horse blinders of a specific Clean Water Act permit.
And Senator Carozza, just to clarify too, the definitions of overburden and underserved are in statute. So those are well defined.
Okay, Senator Watson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just looking at what this bill is trying to accomplish. And I think we all agree that the goals are very laudable. I'm just looking at the implementation, and it just looks like this will be god awful expensive. I mean, there's a whole saying that a butterfly flying in China will somehow in some form impact the environment over here in the United States. This talks about sea level rise, storm surges and flooding, increased precipitation and temperature, extreme weather events. And I'm going to assume that's for our local area where this development is taking place. It seems like you would need a whole gang of scientists. And I don't see what is this, MDE? I don't see them having this current level of expertise to be able to do this. But the cost associated with it, I'm assuming is going to increase the staff to be able to do this type of assessment and analysis. And then once they do it, what's the scorecard look like? How much temperature rise is acceptable? How much sea level rise is acceptable? Is the goal 0 impact? I know ideally that would be what we want, but there has to be some levels of, gradation in there when you start talking about this. How does that work?
Thank you for the question, Senator Watson. I would say that the portion of the bill that you're looking at is the reporting part of the bill that applies to 11 key state agencies. The language that you pointed out is actually already in state code, and these agencies already report on climate change every single year. So what this bill would be doing is adding environmental justice components to that reporting. So we're saying if you're reporting on climate justice, you're one of these 11 key state agencies that already do so. We think you should be reporting on environmental justice as well. We know that MDE already does this in their climate reports that are required under this part of the bill.
Adversely impacts a minority community. Does that mean the development activity will not move forward, or will there be some kind of compensation to that impacted community?
What this bill does is gives MDE the ability to mitigate any of the impacts that would happen. It gives MDE the authority to amend the permit based on those impacts, but it wouldn't sort of automatically mandate a denial. That is not what this bill does.
All of this assessment happens up front. In other words, there will not be an activity where millions of dollars are spent and then we get the results of this and some developer is out, millions and millions of dollars because they can't move forward or have to alter, their going in plan. Is that fair?
I think that's fair to say. It happens at the state environmental permitting level. This bill isn't intended to impact local and county decisions in any way. So I believe it would happen sort of early on in that process if the developer is seeking the environmental permit as appropriate.
Okay, any additional questions for the panel? Senator Washington?
Thank you. It seems to me, I guess, to build on Senator Watson, it seems to me the core, and thank you for this bill. Again, doing really quite well. On page 6, lines 7 through 9. This seems to be the authority that the department may deny or alter a decision or amend the conditions on a pending permit based on the department's findings. So that's the key. In that at the moment, I think we've talked about this in the past, that currently there is no mechanism to actually enforce or use the information from the environmental justice score. And certainly my district experienced that when they were when a crematorium was going to be put in a residential community, and the community just 100 feet from the community. And they've taken it to court. So it's being held up right now. But the agency continued to say that the way we're structured is if you just tick certain boxes, that they have no evaluative decision-making. So pretty much of the whole bill, would this be the key authority that's needed? And
Yes,
the rest of it is.
Yes, so the rest
Nice
is
to have.
enabling legislation,
Right.
and then the reporting component at the end of the bill is just more of an accountability piece, but this authority right here is the main piece.
One of the list of things, and then providing an opportunity to say that if it's determined that this would disproportionately impact, and then also the notion, I guess, of a cumulative impact, which is very important in urban areas, because it's difficult to determine point source contamination. So, okay, well, thank you very much for clarifying that. Would you say that's also the case, sponsor? Would you agree with that as well?
Absolutely. So my districts are pretty unique, covering 3 counties and growing up in an urban area. For example, where I live in Brandywine, we have a rubble fill less than 2 miles from my home, a brand new power plant 2 miles from my home, and in a combined 5 to 7 mile distance where we are, we have roughly 5 power plants or the like in that portion of it. And community input and impacts are a serious concern for us going forward. So just trying to find another way to combat and be a part of the needed energy growth and whatever else we need in our community. So thank you.
Okay, any additional questions? Senator Cardoza?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'll be brief. And this is really just more to the Senate sponsor. I know that it's been noted that these terms are clearly defined. But when you look at the term overburdened community, it gets into, and they say any area above the 75th percentile for 3 or more parameters, which include proximity to CAFO, percent of population, lacking broadband, emergency room discharge. Then that gets into the definition of percentage and proximity. So I think at that point, and my understanding is you said you are going to work with MDE, but I think this is the kind of, the drill down that, that there's a lot of uncertainty on, you might have, okay, here's the definition. The definition itself might raise other questions. Does MDE have those, even that screening tool that captures it? So I would just ask that that follow up with MDE would get into those type of detail.
Fair enough.
Danny, we've got Senator Augustine.
Sorry. Can I just ask you all, I mean, aren't these definitions already the definitions as they are in our current statute?
Correct.
As if they are right now. So this is what we're living with under our current statute. And then I just, as someone who also represents areas that are facing these kind of cumulative impacts and environmental justice issues that we have, will this help us where we have found where we aren't able to take into consideration cumulative impact of the variety of different environmental justice wrongs like that happen in my community? Will this help with that?
So the bill is intended to help with that as environmental permits are renewed every couple of years. So you don't get one sort of bite at the apple when it comes to MDE's permitting process for any environmental permit. So yes, to any new facility in an area or an existing facility, it requires MDE to take a little bit more of a thorough evaluation and look more closely at sort of mitigating impacts for those communities.
The additional Senator Hester.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just really enjoying digging into this wonderful bill, Senator Jackson. And it seems like the point you were just talking about on page 6, that the department may alter or deny a decision. I mean, that's kind of exactly what, if you read the letter from MDE, I mean, Secretary McElwain is saying that she wants to develop a data-driven strategy to address this pollution. And so I think that giving them the authority to do that, but while letting her develop the strategy to do it would be harmonious. Do you think so?
That is what we're seeking. Yes.
Okay. I don't see any additional questions. We're going to go. We do have another panel of some favorables. We're going to go take them next. We've got Patricia Monroe. Is Ms. Monroe here? Jose Coronado Flores, Casa, Jeff Guido. I see Mr. Guido back there. Okay, that's the in-person favorables, and then we're going to have some unfavorables and one or two virtual witnesses. So who wants to go start first? Mr. Guido, you want to lead off?
Certainly.
And
Thank you,
we'll
Mr.
go down.
Chairman.
We'll go down.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Madam Chair, committee members, Jeffrey Guido on behalf of the Baltimore DC Metro Council. We're here with a favorable support of the bill. We actually are in support of the labor standards as they are on page 7 through 8. We think as permits are issued, the Department of Labor should ensure that these labor standards are met. Maryland has the highest median income of any state in the country and consequently the lowest percentage of persons living in poverty. I think the median income from 2021 census data was $91,000 a year. And we don't want, as these new permits are issued and as we begin transitions from, say, fossil fuels to new energy, renewable energy, to lower the standards and the quality of life that is enjoyed by most people living in Maryland. And we ask for a favorable report. Thank you.
Okay, let's pass it down. Tell us your name, and then each of you have 2 minutes.
Okay. Good afternoon, Chairman and committee. My name is Patricia Monroe, and I am the president of the South Lawn Citizens Association. For almost 2 years, residents in the Oxon Hill and Fort Washington have been fighting against the installation of a 1 megawatt lithium ion battery energy storage system on Livingston Road. a project in the making that very few residents knew anything about. No communication that this was going in our neighborhood. Of great concern to the residents of the immediate and surrounding area is that since this is a pilot project, there are too many unknowns. The data that is available is less than 5 years old and is still being studied. One major concern is the effects of global warming, various temperature swings, storms, and terrorist threats. The community discovered that the contractor Pepco hired for this project was not in good standing with the state of Maryland. Another reason that the neighbors are to be concerned about the project design. There has been very little communication between Pepco and residents in the surrounding area. We have spoken with a professor hired by the EPA to study lithium-ion battery hazards and harmful emissions. There are too many unknowns with lithium-ion batteries as it relates to utility application. The community organizations and area residents are convinced that this is just one example of a large corporate entity engaging in environmental racism by preying on what it regards as a minority community. The pilot project in Montgomery County is located miles away from the residential homes, schools, and daycare centers. This project is less than 200 feet from a daycare, residential homes, and 3 schools less than 1 mile away. The reasons above, we implore this body to give a favorable report on the Climate, Labor, and Environmental Equity Act.
Okay, sir.
Good afternoon. Thank you to the chair and committee for having my testimony, and also thank you for the time leeway on the translation. My name is Jose Coronado Flores. I'm a policy analyst with the organization CASA. We're here in support of the bill. Many of our members live in some of the most polluted communities in the state. I want to talk to you about 2 specific communities. You can reference their census tract, which is where I got the data from, but these communities are East Riverdale, Maryland, and census tract just north of Langley Park. The first one in East Riverdale is a low-income immigrant community that has a 0.91 exposure score from the state's environmental justice score, meaning that people who live here are exposed to toxins every day. Additionally, the census tract north of Langley Park has an exposure score of 0.96 and a socioeconomic score of 0.92, meaning that there's extreme pollution where there's a high density of low-income people of color. People living in highly polluted areas should not have to worry about more polluting businesses opening up in their communities. And with the passing of SB 743, these communities will have a way of preventing more pollution in their living space. CASA urges a favorable report.
Okay, any questions of the panel? Okay, seeing none, we're going to next move to, we have one, thank you. We've got one virtual witness signed up favorable with amendments, Jacoby Wilson from the University of Maryland. We're going to try to, is Mr. Wilson queued in? Okay, and then we'll go to the unfavorables. Mr. Wilson, we see you. You've got 2 minutes to weigh in. You're signed up favorable with an amendment.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity, Chair. My name is Dr. Jacoby Wilson. I'm a professor of the Maryland Institute for Applied Environmental Health. Director, Center for Community Engagement, Environmental Justice and Health. I'm on the EPA's Cumulative Impacts Work Group. I'm one of the architects of the Maryland EJ screening tool that's being used to delineate overburdened, underserved. And also I do a lot of work addressing cumulative impacts with communities in the state of Maryland and across the Mid-Atlantic. So when we talk about cumulative impact assessment, it's the process of accounting for cumulative impacts in the context of problem identification and decision-making. It requires consideration and characterization of total exposures in both chemical and non-chemical stressors. That's biological, that's natural, that's physical, that's psychosocial stressors. Cumulative impact assessment explores how stressors from the built, natural, and social environment affect people, potentially causing or exacerbating health adverse outcomes. It also accounts for health mitigating factors and solutions aimed at improving health and well-being. So I just want to give that quick definition, because when we talk about these issues, I think the bill does a good job of capturing some of the sources of cumulative impacts. I believe when you think about these impacts on public health are very important. I would like to see a few amendments because I think the focus on greenhouse gases as climate forcing gases is important, but we need to include co-pollutants that you've heard from many of the witnesses that are really the ones that are impacting public health, like particulate matter, like volatile organic compounds, nitrogen dioxide, and other combustion byproducts, whether it be from mobile or stationary sources, which tends, been already said, are found disproportionately in communities of color and low wealth communities. I think there needs to be a better focus on surveillance, a better emphasis on surveillance in the bill. I also think when it comes to the Justice 40 initiative, there is some language around workforce development and jobs. That minimum should be 40% and not 25%. And then there's no mention of University of Maryland in the bill since we do all this EJ work. So just want to say that. And I'll close my comments. Thank you, Chair. Favorable with amendments for 743.
Okay, any questions for Mr. Wilson? Okay, thank you, Mr. Wilson, for your testimony. We're now going to go to a panel of unfavorables, of which we have three signed up. We've got Bob Etten. I see Mr. Etten. We've got Mr. Ballantyne. And we've got Lori Graff. Is Ms. Graff here? Okay. And those are the three unfavorables, and those are the final witnesses on the bill. Mr. Ballantyne, you want to lead off?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll do that. My name is Tom Ballantyne. I'm here on behalf of NAIOP Maryland. We're a commercial real estate trade association. We
Perfect.
That's in better position, isn't it? Okay, thank you. Tom Ballantyne on behalf of NAIOP Maryland. We're a commercial real estate trade association. We certainly appreciate the goals of the bill. Our concerns are focused on the scope of the permits that are called out and the difficulty in completing the required analysis. The bill does apply to intense activities like wastewater treatment plants, hazardous waste facilities, but it also applies to air and water permits related to relatively minor business activities like restaurant grills, boilers, backup power generators, automotive repair, dry cleaners, and to stormwater permits for development and redevelopment. We recognize there can be legitimate concerns about the impacts of development and redevelopment projects, but on balance, we think our activities, especially in underserved communities, can be beneficial from an economic and environmental standpoint. And the bill really doesn't differentiate between permits based on the intensity of the activities. The minor permitted activities that are swept up in this larger bill, I think would result in the bill would be unlikely to result in better environmental protections for those sorts of small incidental permits. And we're here in opposition, but we certainly would like to see the bill change so that it reflects the magnitude and the kind of the scale of impacts more accurately. Thank you.
We already have a light up, so let's go to
Sorry.
Senator Augustine.
Thank you, Tom. I just have to, would you agree that the way that we are currently set up, there is each permit is considered without consideration to anything else? I mean, on all of these permits right now, would you agree that that's currently how we are set up?
Without consideration for anything else? I don't think I agree with that.
So for example, with the air permit, because I've gone through this in my neighborhood, right? When you talked about air permits, and we will have 4 or 5 of these folks right next to each other. But when we talk to the way that it's organized right now to the department, and we say, well, wow, I can't look, we got 5 in a row. What they say to us is we only consider the one from this particular one, and we don't care. That's not fair. We don't consider the other 4 when we're doing it. Is that not the way that it is currently organized?
I think I don't know specifically how they determine the characteristics that you're talking about. I don't know what kind of air permits you're discussing. Right?
State air permits.
For large emissions or small?
Across the board. I mean, this again, because this is, this happens in the area that I represent, that they treat each one of them individually and don't take any consideration for anything that goes beyond, because of the nature of it, that goes beyond the perimeter of where the permit is being requested.
Yeah, I appreciate your question. I appreciate your question. It would be helpful to have the department here to explain their perspective on it and exactly what they mean by the statements they gave you. Yeah.
Like I said, I don't need them to explain. I've gone through it multiple times. So what you're saying, I just don't see how, right?
That's what this is looking to do. This is looking to, do you agree? So you can't answer my question. Let's just go there. Is that right?
I'm not sure I agree entirely with the premise, but I'm certainly not able to answer your question in full. Yeah. That's true. Yes, Senator.
Okay, since we've opened up the door on the Q&A, we're going to go to Senator Carozza.
Thank you. I think this one is easier, but it does go back to the Maryland Department of the Environment. Following up on Senator Hester's questions or maybe Senator Kagan mentioned it. It said in their information sheet, they said the department would like to develop its own clearly defined and data-driven strategy to address pollution in overburden and underserved areas. And then, Mr. Valentine, going to your testimony about the minor activities, like, I guess, differentiating between maybe the size of the projects and maybe, to Senator Augustine's point, the volume in a certain geographic area. But I guess what I'm asking is, if the department is indicating that they want to develop this strategy, clearly defined and data-driven strategy, and that they intend to begin immediately according to this, do you think then your issues about differentiating between the size of projects, maybe geographic areas, then falls into that?
I would hope so. It sounds like it does.
Okay, I'm just trying to connect some dots, so, okay.
Why don't we go to Ms. Graff next? And again, we'll open up for questions after Mr. Ed as well. Ms. Graff, why don't you state your name and we've got 2 minutes.
Great. Thank you so much. My name is Lori Graff. I'm the CEO of the Maryland Building Industry Association. We share some of Mr. Valentine's concerns. I am going to bring this back to housing. I know you've heard a lot about the pollution of other things, but we do need more housing in the state. Our concern with this bill is we just don't really know what the impact will be. And you can see from the fiscal note, there was a lot of questions about what the impact would be on housing. Does it make it more expensive? Does it take it longer to process it? Where can we build and those types of things? So we're very concerned about that. The other thing I want to just bring up is Climate Solutions Now Act. You guys passed it last year as an omnibus bill. It was already been brought up a couple of times. It does have some provisions, including having MDE look at evaluate the impacts on environmental justice. There's a lot in that bill. I would say we need to let some of that play out also before we go passing other things. So we have a lot of concerns about that. Again, if the narrow scope that was narrowed a little bit more, I think we would be much more supportive of it. But we are very concerned on the impact on housing, especially in these communities, because we do think that some of these communities do need more housing. So we would like to work with the department, work with the sponsor to possibly fix that piece of it. But with that, as introduced, we request an unfavorable report. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Eden.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Robert Eden on behalf of the Maryland Building Industry Association. And I share the concerns raised by Mr. Valentine and by my client, Ms. Graff. I looked at the fiscal note, and if you go to page 5 of the fiscal note, they discuss the effect on permit applicants and permit holders. And I think this, kind of reflects the concern that we have. The last 2 sentences where they talk about the ultimate impacts depend on a number of unknown factors, including how MDE makes a determination of impact on an underserved community or an overserved community, how many permit applications are affected, whether they charge a fee to cover its costs. They go on to say that given the comprehensive nature of the climate and environmental equity evaluation established by the bill, and the fact that MDE may deny or alter a decision or amend the conditions under a pending permit based on its findings, for any permit application that triggers this evaluation, there could be a potentially significant permit delays and increased cost. And I think that's the concern that we have. We represent home builders. And part of our focus and part of what we try to do and part of what you ask us to do is to try to address affordable housing, particularly in underserved communities, to come in and buy a block or buy houses or buy former commercial properties that are run down, that need work, and to convert them into affordable housing. And our concern is that at least the way this bill is written and looking at the fiscal note, we agree it's so uncertain. We don't know what the cost is going to be. Our fear is that for us, the bill makes no distinction between commercial and residential development whatsoever. And for us, we're residential builders, and our concern is this going to negatively impact our ability to come in and do what everyone seems to want us to do, which is to help promote affordable, new, clean housing in underserved areas. That's our concern.
Okay, any questions for any of the panelists, any of the three panelists? Okay, seeing none, that concludes the bill hearing on Senate Bill 743, and we're going to next move to Senator Carter, Senate Bill 768. Is Senator Carter in the House? We're going to get her. I think she was in and out. Let's go search the hall for Senator Carter. In the meantime, she does have some sponsor panelists, which I will call up. There she is. Nina Themelis. These are favorable sponsor panelists. Nina Themelis, Dominic Buchko, who's in a favorable position, not unfavorable, first time today. Sophia Hossain, Baltimore Department of Public Works. And those are the three sponsored panelists. And so who am I missing?
I think that's it, Mr. Chair.
I got three.
Nina Themelis had to leave, and so.
Okay, so then we've got Dominic and Sophia.
Yeah.
Okay, excellent.
And
Okay,
then-
yeah.
Sophia Hussein is virtual. Do you have that?
Oh, I'm sorry, you're right. She's virtual. So we've got Dominic, and then I'm sorry, who are you?
I'm Janelle Mummy from the mayor's office.
From the mayor's office. Okay, you're
So
not
I'm
signed up, but we'll let you.
Right.
Replacing Nina
I'm
Themelis.
replacing
Oh,
Nina.
okay, fair enough. Okay, Senator Carter on Senate Bill 768. You've got the time you need to present the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. This should be a pretty brief and simple bill. It simply enhances reporting requirements for waste haulers that sell, transfer, or otherwise dispose of waste to a facility or disposal site located in the county and Baltimore City. Basically, it requires the submission of a report by March 1st of each year regarding waste disposal activities for the immediate calendar year. The report must include information regarding waste and disposal sites and any other information required by the county. The bill provides for a civil fine of $50 for each day that a violation exists. Just to try to simplify, I think that the bill can be simplified, and you can hear from the panel of experts, but my understanding is it simply improves the accuracy of data collection is the first reason that we need it. And secondly, it requires hauling entities to make reports separating source data so that it's easier to decipher. Basically, it's already done in other places, particularly where the chair and vice chair hail from, Montgomery County. And so it's not an exotic concept, and Baltimore City believes they need this. It's a Baltimore City delegation bill, and I will allow you to hear from them. Thank you.
Okay, we'll next go to the witness from the mayor's office. Tell us your name again.
Good afternoon. My name is Janelle Mummy, and I'm a legislative liaison with the Mayor's Office of Government Relations. And I'm here to testify on behalf of the Baltimore City Administration in support of Senate Bill 768. Senate Bill 68 would require private waste haulers to submit annual tonnage reports on solid waste collection and disposal in a format determined by each county or face a penalty. The bill does two important things. First, it improves accuracy in collection data from the commercial sector, which Baltimore City has a lot of commercial property that we're not able to account for. And second, it increases the efficiency of the reporting system by requiring hauler entities to report the source separated data they already have on hand by ton. Many jurisdictions operate their own processing facilities and readily have access to this data. But for jurisdictions that don't have their own facilities like Baltimore City, gathering accurate private sector data is nearly impossible, despite the recycling mandates in place at the city level. Commercial haulers in at least Baltimore County and Montgomery County are often work across county lines, But by requiring them to report their data, the state has an opportunity to create synergy across jurisdictions and develop a standardized method of waste collection and reporting. We want to highlight that this is our legislation and it's modeled after Montgomery County's hauler reporting requirements, which have contributed to an increase in the quality and quantity of their collection data. In Montgomery County's solid waste management plan, they detail the importance of this data for solid waste system and sector relative recycling and disposal tonnages. They currently have one of the highest MRA rates in the state. And for this reason, we respectfully request a favorable report on Senate Bill 768.
Okay, thank you for your testimony, Mr. Butchko.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, Dominic Butchko with the Maryland Association of Counties. I echo many of the comments here from my colleague from Baltimore City. So many jurisdictions aren't reaching our state mandated recycling goals, and a lot of that is just because it's bad data. This bill puts reporting requirements on one of the most logical places to do that in the waste system. And a lot of these companies are already doing this for billing purposes to some extent. They might have to do a little bit more, but in order to meet our recycling goals, everyone has to do their part. This is a common sense bill, and MACO urges a favorable report. Thank you.
Okay, any questions? I've got Senator Hester. You look like you're about ready to push. Okay, Senator Hester.
Thank you. I was just, I was actually find this fascinating because I was preparing for a budget hearing where MD will be tomorrow to ask them about county level recycling. So you guys I'm right on time.
We planned it that way.
Did you? Very, very good. I mean, my question was about like whether we know if each county, like whether they're charging, like if they know how much they're recycling or they're not recycling and how much they're charging at the local landfills. And so I guess it all kind of fits together, right? That where they're actually disposing of the waste plus where they're hauling it to. So my question is, if you get this data about the waste haulers, but wouldn't you also want the data about what's actually happening at the local landfills or transfer stations?
I think you're best to answer that.
So Baltimore City has collection centers, the landfill and the transfer station, but we don't have MRFs, the facilities that process this data. So like we take our waste to several facilities outside of Baltimore City, like Waste Management, and I believe it's Elkridge, and they tell us, you know, what we're delivering to them. And so we have no idea besides our collection, what we're sending out and the numbers they're giving us of whether, you know, what the numbers are, because other facilities are, you know, other haulers are going to their facilities and putting in their report, but we're not being billed for, you know, their activities. So we're not receiving that information. So in Baltimore City, as you know, there's so much commercial property and universities and just a lot of non-residential property, also multifamily property, and collecting that data we feel would be a more realistic representation of what the city is actually recycling. It is not, it's a statewide, and it is
It's a statewide bill.
yeah.
Yeah.
All put together.
Yeah. And then there's definitely room for improvement too there.
Okay,
It's
good.
enabling. That's
Okay.
the word I was looking for. It's enabling.
Okay, let's clarify, because Senator mentioned Baltimore City delegation, enabling statewide. We'll get to the bottom of it, but we need to clarify what we're dealing with. Any additional questions of the panel? Okay, seeing none, we do have one virtual witness that was mentioned a little earlier, Sophia Hossain from the Baltimore Department of Public Works. And there she is. Ms. Hossain, you've got 2 minutes to weigh in with your favorable testimony.
Thank you. Good afternoon, members of the committee. Please be advised that Baltimore City DPW supports SB 768. My name is Sophia Hossain, and I'm the Zero Waste Manager for Baltimore City's Department of Public Works Bureau of Solid Waste. For Baltimore, this legislative request would help us gather private sector data on waste recycling and organic waste tonnages and disposal destinations for our annual Maryland Recycling Act reporting. On the city side, underreporting results in a small fraction of completed MRA forms, resulting in low reported recycling rates despite city level recycling requirements for commercial entities. For haulers, reporting this data could be as simple as a spreadsheet function, filtering tonnages by address and zip code and year. For organics haulers specifically, they keep detailed records for billing purposes and best management practices, and they've willingly shared this information with us on request. All of our haulers are licensed through Baltimore City Health Code Section 7-221. So in opposition to this bill, some haulers have claimed that material recycling facilities are required to report these tonnages directly to counties, but those MRFs are not able to report on source separated data, and they're not required to. Haulers also claim that they can't tell where loads come from, but local businesses have shared that private haulers are providing tonnage data to their customers on their monthly bills because they're billed by ton. In addition, in Montgomery County, there is an existing hauler reporting mandate in place since 2013, which implies that local haulers are already providing this data through the same data requested through this legislation to at least one Maryland county. Overall, this reporting mandate would improve the ability of counties to accurately track and report on their entire solid waste stream, which helps the state reach our MRA goals, but also develops a detailed understanding of organics hauling and recycling participation across the private sector. This data could be leveraged to help local governments identify where recycling and diversion activities need to be better supported and what additional services or infrastructural developments are needed to reach state and local sustainability goals. For these reasons, Baltimore City respectfully requests a favorable report on SB 768.
Okay, any questions for the witness? Seeing none, thank you. Thank you for your testimony. We have one witness unfavorable. We've got Pam Casemeyer. I see Ms. Casemeyer back there. Why don't you come up to the witness table? And Ms. Casemeyer, you have signed up unfavorable and you've got 2 minutes.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Pam Casemeyer on behalf of the Maryland Delaware Solid Waste Association. And I wanted to maybe give you some information about why we're here in opposition. The Montgomery County structure that keeps getting referenced, they have a licensure requirement for companies that who operate in their county. No other county does. This really is a local issue. Every single county manages its waste stream differently. And right now, all of the material recycling facilities are required to provide the counties their numbers on recycling. And I would ask you whether there can be some improvement in that, yes, but a one size fits answer isn't going to help the county who does some things differently. Baltimore City does its own residential collection. They have commercial collection, I guess, but they wouldn't, I don't think under this bill even know who it was that was collecting because they don't have a licensure system like Montgomery County. Other counties have different ways that they organize how they get their data. The recycling data comes from the material recycling facilities. That's already in current law because every jurisdiction's collection system is totally different. So it is the most uniform way across all jurisdictions. We make reference in our testimony, I'm gonna make sure my time. There's a task force bill in the House that may be coming over. I think if you really need to pull more of the counties together to figure out, because my guess is they may or may not have the same problem. And I'm not saying the city may not have something we need to work on, but the answer for the city may not be the answer for Prince George's or some counties may say we get everything we need from the MRFs already. So I don't need any other reports because it could end up being duplicative. And this bill isn't enabling. This bill says it shall happen. So with that, I'm glad to take any questions.
Okay, so just on that last point, I mean, we heard somebody say it's enabling, you say it's got shall language. Could you just maybe
Yeah, it
focus on that?
says, it basically says that you have to do it. It says, it doesn't say, I don't see anywhere where it says the county could choose to do it. But
Okay, well, we'll figure all that out, but
Yeah.
Any questions for Ms. Casemeyer specifically? Okay, seeing none, that concludes the bill hearing on Senate Bill 768, and we're gonna next turn to Senator Alonzo Washington, Washington, not to be confused with M. Washington. Senate Bill 813, Senator, got two sponsor panelists designated, Rebecca Rare and Jose Coronado Flores, if I could bring them up. And Senator, you have all the time you need to explain your bill, and then we'll go to the panel. I will take all of
I will take all the time I need for this bill. And I also want to just say that I wouldn't be mad if you mischaracterize me as Mary Washington as well. So that's all right. For the record, Delegate Senator Alonzo Washington here. This is my first bill hearing over here, actually. So hopefully that means you're going to pass this bill. So we'll see. Over the past several years in my district, I've seen so many storms that have passed and so many flooding situations that have occurred throughout my district and throughout the state. To help address this, because of that, we've seen multiple properties damaged, whether it's businesses or it's families' homes or homeowners or things of that nature, to help address the flooding issue in our state, because we provide so much funding to cleaning the water in order to go through the Chesapeake Bay. We don't provide enough funding to our localities to help mitigate flooding. You all know in my district in Edmonston, we've had years and years of flooding situations that happened there, and they became renowned on the East Coast as one of the most progressive stormwater management systems. And that was about over 10 years ago. And now they're still flooding like crazy there right now. And even in Riverdale Park, where we had one recently. And I know this happens everywhere throughout our state, including Ellicott City and many other places in my county. This bill essentially will increase the fund for the flood management fund that we have here in the state from simply $10 million to $20 million a year, double the fund, because our localities need it. I've talked to our Department of Environment in our county where they don't see the state actually providing enough funding to mitigate stormwater management in these areas. And so we want to, as a state, we should be investing in making sure that we protect our families from stormwater that occurs. I do have an amendment in here. The amendment ensures the grant funding is being used equitably. We have drafted an amendment to the bill which requires at least 40% of funding provided under the program to be used for projects located in or directly benefiting census tracts that are overburdened or underserved. This is something that's not currently in the bill, not currently in the fund itself. As it exists. This was an amendment that was drafted and provided to me from the Maryland Department of Environment, who actually oversees this fund. So they want this to occur, and so does our municipalities, and you'll hear from some of them a little later. This legislation will assist in achieving the state's goals of mitigating the impacts of climate change and creating environmental justice, while also providing much needed support to our local jurisdictions. I have a list here, and I believe it should be in all of your packets of areas that have benefited from this program. And it's been, since its existence, it's been in the last few years, I believe it's been about $33 million that is applied throughout our state, anywhere from Anne Arundel County, Baltimore City, Dorchester, Allegheny, Talbot, Caroline, Wacomico, Howard, Prince George's County. All of us have benefited from this fund. And I believe if we double this fund, all of us will continue to benefit from it. And now with this new amendment, we'll make sure it's equitably funded across the state as well. So with that, I urge your favorite report of my first bill. Thank you all. Appreciate it.
And we'll go to the panel. I would note that because of that extra 10 million, the Budget and Taxation Committee has sent over Senator Sarah Elfreth to assess the situation and see whether this is worthy of an extra 10 million. But that said, let's go to the panelists, and each of you has 2 minutes.
Good afternoon, Chair and Committee. Thank you for having me again. My name is Jose Coronado Flores with CASA. We're here in support of this bill because it's going to address and prevent inconveniences, damages, and the dangers of flooding, especially in overburdened and underserved communities. I want to draw on 2 examples brought to my attention by CASA members. The first one is a very specific pathway behind the Villas apartment in Langley Park. This local pathway connects a high-density apartment complex to a Boys and Girls Club and a local elementary school. Whenever it rains, we can say from low, moderate to severe rain, this whole area floods. This pathway becomes extremely muddy, and due to local pollution and littering, it is covered in trash. So moms, dads, parents who are bringing their kids to school in the morning have to either take a very elongated path around this area and not go through this very clear and short path just to avoid not having to go send their kids completely covered in mud. Additionally, CASA member, we have a strong membership in the Rock Creek Wood Apartments in Rockville. This particular complex is known for severe flooding, and last year actually had a death due to very sudden flash flooding, and over 150 tenants were displaced in that community. If you look at the communities that I've mentioned, sadly, they lie in census tracts that are very low, high density, low income population, as well as high immigrant or non-white population. Rains and severe weather are going to only intensify and are going to occur more frequently. And without action, our most vulnerable communities are going to keep suffering, ranging from inconveniences to sadly fatalities. This is why CASA urges a favorable report.
Okay, Rebecca, you got 2 minutes.
Great, thank you so much. Chair Feldman, Vice Chair Kagan, members of the committees. My name is Rebecca Rear. I'm the Director of Climate Policy and Justice at Maryland LCV here in support of SB 813. I just want to quote MDE's website on the Comprehensive Flood Management Grant Program as part of my testimony. With climate change resulting in more frequent and intense storms in Maryland, the CFMGP is more relevant now than ever. That's why we support increasing the funding to the program while allocating funding to overburden or underserved communities through application of Justice 40. Thank you for your consideration, and we urge a favorable report.
Okay, any questions for the sponsor or for the witnesses? We're going to go to Senator Gallion and then Senator Watson and then Senator Eskin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and welcome, Senator, to this committee for your bill hearing. So upping the funding $10 million. Previously, what's the data like? Is the demand always using up all the 10 that's already in there? How'd you come up with that number for the extra 10? Are you just trying to, did you have some data that showed, hey, we need to do this exact amount? I was just curious.
Yeah. Thanks for the question, Senator. I think what I did was I talked to our Department of Environment in Prince George's County, and we have a multitude of projects that are shovel ready and ready to go, including in Edmiston and Riverdale Park and other places throughout our county, including some of these census tracts that we're talking about. And they gave me a list of they gave me an amount of some of those that would help. And with this, they'll be able to, because it's going to be shared throughout the state, they'll be able to clear some of these backlogs of projects within one project every year under this new fund. So I wanted to just double it because we haven't increased it in a while. It seems like we're piecemealing it every time we, almost every year, where some projects are added to the fund itself.
Okay, before we get to Senator Watson, because we have a guest here, we're going to take our guest, Sarah. Your lights on. Senator Alfred, we want you to ask a question.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the committee. And this is Senator, thank you for the bill. It's an incredibly important program. My district benefits greatly, similar flooding issues that we're experiencing around the state. Mr. Chair, I know I'm supposed to ask a budget question, but I have a policy question. Is that appropriate?
We will allow.
Thank you. Senator, just looking at your amendment, is it in the same vein as this committee, when the whole body did the Tree Solutions Now Act, defined underserved communities in a specific way that I thought was incredibly comprehensive, but also nuanced. Does your amendment match that, those same communities in this bill?
It should, and if it doesn't, we can craft an amendment to make sure it does.
Okay, I appreciate. I think it makes a lot of sense, and we have the map already. And it would be,
exactly.
Okay,
yep.
Thank you.
And again, before you popped in, this amendment came from the Department of Environment.
Okay.
So we're appreciative of them even considering it, and so I think that we're going to make sure we craft something that's going to be equal to the other bill. Thank you.
Okay, Senator Watson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you for this bill, Senator. I was looking for something like this. As you know, I have a street in my district called Water Street in downtown Upper Marlboro, and it's named that for a reason. It floods each and every year. And one year it flooded, the flood level came up 5 feet, and there was $300,000 worth of damages to the Marlboro Tire Club. My question is about the amendment. I'm not familiar with how underserved and overburdened communities are established, and how would I go to find out what areas in my district fall into that?
Yeah, again, and Senator, what I'll say just, and we can talk offline a little bit more about, because I think Senator Alfred's question and us trying to dive in deeper about what census tracts those will fall under. And again, it's only 40%, at least 40% of the fund will be allocated towards those communities. So the other 60% can go anywhere in the state. Yep.
Okay, Senator Hester, and then we'll go to Senator Brooks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator, thank you for this bill. We share something in common. The first bill I had here in 2019 was to fill this fund, which had been empty before that.
Oh, well.
Unfortunately, I only asked for $2 million. But I am behind your strong ask. I just also wanted to offer to talk to you offline. There's currently funding from the federal government open through the BRIC program.
Yep.
And we also passed a bill called the comprehensive, what's it called? The Resilient Maryland Revolving Loan Fund, which is a 10-year, 1% interest fund, so anything that you need on flooding, come see me.
I will. I'll be there knocking on your door.
Okay, Senator Brooks.
Thanks, Chair. Senator, thanks for the bill. There were 11 unfavorable with no testimony. Did any of them reach out to you?
Not one.
Okay, good. And secondly,
Who's unfavorable to this bill?
yeah, on the amendment, will that have any impact on the existing fiscal note?
No, I don't think so. No, it will stay at the amount that's in stat. If this bill passes, it will stay at that amount. It won't change the fiscal note.
Okay, all right. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, any additional questions for the panel and sponsor? Seeing none. The only other in-person favorable I have is Dominic Butchko from Mako. Dom, why don't you come up here, signed up favorable? And then we have a couple of virtuals. So we've got 2 minutes.
Yeah.
On the Mako position.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, I think you heard why this is a good bill. Me too. Mako urges a favorable report. Thank you.
Excellent testimony. We're going to go now to 2 virtual signed up favorable. We've got Rod Barnes. Mr. Barnes, are you in the house in the queue?
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Barnes, we do see you and you've got 2 minutes. You're signed up favorable.
All righty. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Senator Alonzo Washington. We're excited in Edmonston that this is your first bill, and we hope that the committee will ultimately pass it in favor. Edmonston has experienced horrific flooding over the years. We thought we had solved that back in 2009 when we installed a better and more improved pumping station. Unfortunately, climate change started happening, and now the storms come more severe and more rapid when they do come, and our storm drain system and pumping station cannot keep up. So I appreciate that the senator mentioned about the BRIC funding and other programs. BRIC is extremely complicated and a very difficult program. We worked very hard to try to get a project through that and was not successful. So we're very hopeful that we'll be able to provide some of this money can be used for our community, because we are one of those underdeveloped, underserved communities that fit that criteria. And we have a very high Hispanic population that suffers when these floodings. We had 90 homes flooded in September 10, 2020. Again, in July 3rd, July 10, we had another 30 or 35 homes, and they do not qualify for disaster assistance because it doesn't meet the federal guidelines. So we have to find solutions that can help them, and those solutions come with a price tag. And certainly we can't afford it as a small town with a 1.5 million annual budget, but we look for partners, and we hope that the state will be a large part of that. And we thank Senator Alonzo Washington for introducing his first bill in this area. Thank you.
Okay, we've got a question from Senator Augustine. Mr. Barnes.
Mr. Barnes, it's really good to see you.
Good to see you, Senator.
Yeah, so my question for you is, well, on this next bill, or your next possible bill, will you come down here so I can see you in person?
Absolutely.
All right, I look forward to it. It's good to see you.
Thank you.
Okay, any additional questions for our witness, Mr. Barnes? Okay. Seeing none, we're going to go to our final witness on the bill, Alan Thompson, virtual from the town of Riverdale Park. Mayor, I do see you, and Mayor, you've got 2 minutes. You signed up.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to express support for Senate Bill 813 at this hearing. My name is Alan Thompson, and I'm proud to be mayor of the vibrant and diverse town of Riverdale Park in beautiful Prince George's County. As you might guess from the name of the town, we have a river that runs through town, that being the northeast branch of the Anacostia River. We're just upstream from Edmonston. We have had multiple serious flooding events in our town in the last 8 to 10 years, including a 100-year flood last summer and 2 500-year floods. After the second 500-year flood in less than 5 years, when we knew it wasn't just a one-off event, we leaned into defining stormwater control plans that would prevent future flooding. Being a small town and not the holder of the stormwater permit for our area, we provided Prince George's County with a list of 13 different stormwater projects in town. The county has reviewed the projects, but we have been told that there are not sufficient resources to address those projects in a reasonable timescale. We were not included in last year's BRIC funding application from the county. No timeframe has been provided for when that might happen. We have successfully executed a previous project under a county program to provide funding with project management handled by the municipality for stormwater management. Senate Bill 813 promises to increase state level funding for such projects, and hopefully the bill would help either the county or the town, through arrangements similar to the program I just described, to meet the needs of our residents. While I have not verified our eligibility for the environmental justice provisions, I'm almost certain that many, if not all, of the projects in town will qualify. The town of Riverdale Park would thus like to express our strong support and hopes for a favorable report for Senate Bill 813. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. Any questions for Mayor Thompson? Okay, seeing none, that concludes the bill hearing on Senate Bill 813. We have 2 bills left, one of which is from Senator Elfreth. Since you're here, we're going to go to Senator Elfreth if she's prepared to do that, and that would be Senate Bill 471. And you don't have any designated witnesses, but if you've got some folks here, we do have some folks signed up favorable if you want to bring them up, specifically Matthew Johnston, Matt Stegman, and Dominic Butchko are signed up favorable. I don't know if you mind if they come up and join you.
Please and thank you.
And with that, Senator, we've got Senate Bill 471, and it's all you've got all the time you need.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Madam Vice Chair, members of the committee, Senator Sarah Elfreth representing District 30, and continuing on this good theme started by Senator Washington of when it rains, it pours. And we see flooding incidents across the state, particularly as we see not just more rain, but more severe and shorter storms that frankly, a lot of our very well-intended stormwater mitigation project systems and when there's a construction site, all those systems in place just are not prepared for those more intensive storms that we're seeing more frequently with climate change. An additional problem that this creates is sediment runoff into our streams and waterways that will eventually go into the bay. I'd like to lovingly joke that my district is basically one big critical area with a lot of streams and waterways and rivers and the bay. And we see that sediment it continues to be on the rise. It's the pollutant that we have not been able to mitigate the way we have been successful, more so successful with nitrogen and phosphorus. And the effects are overwhelming. With greater sediment in the bay means it's covering habitat that's critical for our vegetative and animal populations. From a perspective of a boating community, we're seeing the need to dredge more and more, and streams and rivers, again, just being flooded with the sediment. You see the coffee color in our streams and waterways anytime it rains across not just my district, but across the state. And so, Mr. Chair, Senate Bill 471 is just another tool in our toolbox to try to mitigate the negative impacts of increased rainfall and the resulting sediment runoff we're experiencing in our communities. This committee has taken a lead on addressing this in a number of ways. Just a few years back, you led the effort on ensuring that we're actually measuring our rainfall data in a more frequent way. Before then, we were measuring it we're using a measurement from when I was in grade school. We now measure it every 5 years because we're seeing that more intense rainfall, as I mentioned. And making sure that Department of Environment effectively reports the environmental violations in the state when it comes to construction projects and the ensuing, again, rainfall and sediment erosion that comes from them. So this is just the next step forward. So it does 2 things, Mr. Chair. First, it provides better oversight for stormwater discharge permits in the most critical locations. We really did try to bring the bill in a tailored manner, looking at our most critical habitat, appreciating that not every every development project in an area is going to be treated the same in terms of its potential for environmental hazard, unfortunately, that we have certain waterways and certain streams that lead into various tributaries in the bay that just have a greater impact on bay health. And so we really try to tailor this bill to ensure that we require the obtainment of an individual permit as opposed to the current system where the general discharge permit or GDP is authorized. We defined it in the bill as the enhanced review would only be for the large construction sites, so more than 10 acres, that are also located in a sensitive area. And the bill defines that as within floodplains, the critical area buffer, or alongside our highest quality streams. We did try to narrow this. This enhanced review created through requiring the individual permit will not only be beneficial to our waterways, but also to Marylanders and ensuring our most sensitive waterways have that added layer of protection. I have folks on the panel who can speak more to the nuances of general permits versus individual permits, so I'm going to let them do that. But the second tool in the toolbox this bill is going to create is it gives inspectors more tools to investigate water pollution and hold polluters more responsible for the pollution that they create. In doing so, it will clarify that a construction site may not cause sediment pollution or erosion downstream. This is me a surprise to the committee. It was a surprise to me. Again, I represent a lot of waterfront. I did not know that this prohibition is not currently in law. So there's a current disconnect in our law between the situation in which our inspectors have the ability to actually connect the dots between the runoff they're seeing in a stream and the construction site from which that runoff is originating. So again, we're just kind of connecting the dots here to make sure there is a greater accountability when we do see, unfortunately, sediment erosion across the state. And just as proof of concept that this works, Anne Arundel County has been a leader in it, proud to represent it. We have similar language regarding not allowing the sediment runoff. And because of this, the county can take a more holistic approach to inspecting and monitoring construction sites and more proactively mitigate their impact. Furthermore, this legislation as drafted will set an increased fee amount for those that unlawfully engage in construction activity without a discharge permit or without coverage under a general permit. Again, I have some experts on the panel. I want to thank particularly Mako for being here, appreciating that our local partners want more tools connecting in some cases bad actors, in some cases good actors, well-intended, but we just have too much rain and we just have too much sediment runoff. But the point is taxpayers are footing the bill as a consequence. And so we really need more ability to be proactive. We've had 2 meetings so far with MDE on this bill. Very grateful for their engagement. I believe we have another meeting tomorrow to continue to narrow and tailor our intention and be sure. I believe, I don't want to speak for them, I believe one of their chief concerns is just the ability to have MDE staff actually execute this. And I can promise you, as member of Budget and Tax and as the subcommittee chair for the environment, that is a priority for us in Budget and Tax, is ensuring, as you are all know well, that we have a tremendous vacancy rate across state government, and that vacancy rate does not even count. Frankly, the more state staff we need to execute effectively our department's missions. And so you have my commitment that if MDE needs more staff to actually execute this, that in the long term, I'd like to work with this committee to make sure that that is achieved. So with that, Mr. Chair, long-winded way of asking politely, respectfully for a favorable committee report.
Okay,
Thank
well,
you.
thank you for your testimony. Why don't who would you prefer to go next? We'll give you that prerogative. Okay, sir, tell us your name, and then again, you've got 2 minutes.
Yes, thank you. My name is Matt Johnston. I'm the current executive director of Arundel Rivers Federation. Senator Alfrith is my senator because Arundel Rivers Federation protects the Southwest and road rivers in Anne Arundel County and fights for clean water everywhere. And I'm actually here today wearing that hat, but also because for 3 years prior to this current role, I served as the environmental policy director in Anne Arundel County. And one of our biggest concerns while I was in that role was sediment pollution coming off of construction sites. So we did a lot in Anne Arundel County to combat that. As the senator mentioned, some of those lessons are in this bill, including the requirement that you may not cause offsite sediment deposition or erosion. That is in here, and that is in Anne Arundel County law. And I just want to give you all some insight today as to how we do that in Anne Arundel County, because we wouldn't be reinventing the wheel with this bill. How that's done in Anne Arundel County is because that language is in county code, inspectors finally have the tools they need whenever they go on a construction site to go off of that site, walk downstream, document the pollution that's coming off the site, and say, construction company, we have to fix this now. We have to stop work. We have to remove sediment that's in the conveyance channel or that's in our streams, and we have to fix it. And then we go back up on the site. And even if that construction company was following the sediment control plan, we just had a bad rain event, and we know that the next rain event could cause more sediment pollution. So we work with that construction company to increase the controls on the site so it won't happen again. So this process is in play in Anne Arundel County, and I just wanted to be here to answer any questions about that process. Other members up here can answer other questions about the permits and things, but I urge a favorable vote on Senate Bill 471. Thank you for your time.
Okay, we'll go through the whole panel and then open a question. Mr. Butchko, and then we'll end up with Mr. Stegman.
Yeah, so Mr. Chair, members of the committee, Dominic Butchko with the Maryland Association of Counties. This legislation is about accountability. When we are doing development, we've had a lot of talk about housing. There's also other things and other impacts that go into that. Right now, you can be a developer and have a sediment control program, and you can be following that to the letter, and it could be not effective. And so who does that burden ultimately fall on? It's the taxpayers through the county government that has to go in and do stream restoration and repair the environment. This bill gives local governments the tools, and this bill has teeth to ensure that when we are developing, when we are meeting the housing challenges, that we're doing it in a smart way with an eye towards the environment. So this is a good bill. It's common sense, and MACO urges a favorable report.
Okay, Mr. Stegman.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Matt Stegman on behalf of the Chesapeake Bay Foundation. We urge a favorable report on Senate Bill 471. So according to the Chesapeake Bay program, construction sites are the highest loading source of nutrients and sediments on a per acre basis for our waterways. When you have basic stormwater controls at a construction site fail, they can put years or even decades worth of pollution into a waterway in a matter of days. And so better managing these sites is really something that's extremely crucial. Maryland's phase 3 WIP states that by 2025, stormwater is actually going to be a larger source of pollution for the bay than wastewater. So what this bill does, we think that the provisions to have individual permits for large construction sites and particularly environmentally sensitive areas is really crucial, because when you have the individual permits, you can really tailor those to the needs of the specific site and to the capacity and the needs of the waterways that those sites are near. And so with that, this bill would equip our frontline investigators and regulators with the ability to again, really, figure out a way to make sure that these sites are dealt with in the way that is most appropriate, and that all the appropriate controls are being put in place.
Okay,
So,
thank you. Any questions for either Senator Elfreth, the sponsor, or the three witnesses? Okay, seeing none, we do have a full panel of unfavorables, and I'm going to call them up next. Tom Ballantyne, William K.C. Reed, Mr. Reed, Trent Zivkovich, Bob Etten, and Lori Graff. That's a panel of 5 unfavorables, and those are the remaining witnesses here on the bill. So who wants to lead off? Mr. Etten, is there a designated?
No, I'm gonna.
Yes. Yeah, hold on.
I just want to say that we can't see testimony right now, and so it's just making it a little hard. I feel a little, it's unfortunate on some level to folks because we can't see right now the testimony.
Okay, I mean, I don't know what the remedy is. I mean, I think we're gonna have to just. Okay, so just if you're referencing testimony that you've submitted, understand we don't have it online. And I think we just need to push forward and, but yep, absolutely. Hopefully it'll get rectified while we're on this panel. But okay, with that said, is there a point person here on this panel?
I'm going to start.
Okay, Ms. Graff, you start.
Great. Again, Lori Graff, CEO of Maryland Building Industry Association, here in respectful opposition. We do thank the senator for meeting with us to discuss this bill. As a risk of sounding like a broken record, we need more housing. We have to make it more affordable in the state of Maryland, and we need to figure out a way to increase supply. We have some concerns about this legislation that it will make it more costly to build housing and take longer. The fiscal note, and based on our experts, this could take 6 months longer for a housing project to get online. So we have some real concerns about that. Our experts will talk a little bit more about the details, but currently all projects operate under either general permit or the individual permit, mostly under the general permit. And one thing I just want to point out is we do have a brand new general permit that hasn't even taken effect yet. It takes effect on April 1st of this year. Nobody, including ourselves and none of the other groups, appealed that general permit. It is much more protective. Again, another expert will talk a little bit more about that. But we feel like that we need to look at that new general permit. It adds a lot more protection to the environment as we move forward. I also wanted to point out that MDE already has the authority to go in if a project is a bad actor and rectify the situation, put them under a general individual permit, give more restrictions, that type of thing. If they see that there is a problem, there is already that remedy. And lastly, before I turn it over to someone else, one other point I wanted to make, and we in no way, shape, or form encourage bad actors. We are here to represent the good actors in our industry. But this bill does establish a minimum fine as opposed to of $25,000 per acre with no cap. As compared to other parts of the environment article would have maximum fine. So with that, we're happy to work on the issue, try to find some solutions, but we do feel like the general permit, it does its job, and we're urge a unfavorable report. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. N, do you want to go next?
Sure. I would just say this, Mr. Chairman, Robert Enton on behalf of the Maryland Building Industry Association. And we did have a virtual meeting yesterday with the sponsor and the Senate sponsor, Senator Elfreth, and with the House sponsor, did talk about our concerns, with the bill. When I look at it, it just, I would agree with Ms. Graff that, the fine under this is $25,000. It can't be less than $25,000 per acre. And the way I read the bill, and maybe I'm wrong, but it kicks in for 10 acres. So if it kicks in, if you got 10 acres, you're talking about $250,000. And that's per day of the violation. So that seems to me to be a pretty heavy penalty. I'm not an expert. We have other people, I think, on the call today. But it just seems to me that the penalty and the way that it kicks in when I look at it seems pretty heavy. So we really would love to be able to sit down and work this out with the sponsor and the proponents, come up with something that addresses the issue and isn't overly burdensome and overly expensive. Once again, our goal is to build houses and particularly to build affordable housing. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. okay. Whoever wants to grab the mic first. Okay. Tell us your name.
I'm Trent Zivkovich. I'm a partner with Whiteford, Taylor and Preston in Baltimore, where I chair the firm's environmental practice. About 30 years of experience in environmental law, construction industry, and environmental consulting. I am here at the request today of NIOP Maryland to speak to the enforcement issues and some of the legal issues about the permits there that we're looking at here. I believe it's SB 471, unfortunately, adds unnecessary requirements to an existing statutory scheme. Effectively, there's an existing well-established permitting process that already authorizes and provides for the very levels of oversight that are requested by this bill. It unfortunately is duplicative of statutory obligations, and frankly, it enables litigation in many different sites which are maybe opposed by various stakeholders. It also has significant public policy implications. As you know, we have the general permits, which basically categorizes a series of very similar sites. There's a lot of nuance in that general permit that applies to various practices, circumstances, or other conditions such as locations as being in critical areas, tier 2 watersheds, or other impaired areas. The individual permits effectively are site-specific permits. One of the biggest differences between the two is because general permits are sort of a categorical, very similar operations. They're reviewed and approved over a 45-day period. The public receives notice about them. The public has the ability to provide feedback to the state about them. Individual permits take a minimum of 6 months and most often take far longer than that. Another problem is that individual permits, frankly, are available to be appealed on an administrative basis as well as a judicial basis if there's a party, a stakeholder feels that the decision was made improperly. That's not necessarily the case for the general permit. As Ms. Graff has indicated before, the general permit was just issued, comes out April 1st, and it has actually not even been put into place as of yet. It was not appealed. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Sir?
Yes, good afternoon. My name is Casey Reed, and I'm a professional engineer with Rogers Consulting, and I'm here speaking at the request of both MBIA and NIOP. For the past 2 decades, I provided engineering consulting services on land development projects in Maryland. It is in my opinion that this legislation is premature in nature. The concerns it attempts to address by limiting coverage under the general permit are already addressed by long track record of focused stormwater management regulations, critical area programs, and most importantly, the recent expansion of the general permit requirements. Over the last 20 years, I've seen stormwater management regulations evolve multiple times, each evolution more and more focused on protection of natural resources, pollutant removal, and water quality. The current evolution is currently in progress where the aim is to maintain those high water quality standards while ensuring that we develop systems that are resilient to climate change. Additionally, MDE and DNR already manage development in critical areas through more stringent stormwater management requirements, limitations on impervious area coverage, and requirements for pollutant load reductions. Lastly, requirements related to construction activities under the general permit have recently been more stringent, as already noted, so recently such that these aren't in effect until April of this year. These changes are considerable and are the result of several years of efforts by the Department of the Environment, and I believe address many of the same concerns reflected in this legislation. Some of the highlights from the new CP20 permit are preparation of stormwater management pollution prevention plans for each project, enforcement of anti-degradation policies associated with tier 2 or high quality watersheds, increased inspection frequencies, incorporations of the corrective actions concept from EPA, CGP, along with strict guidelines, requirements for daily sampling of dewatering practices with strict turbidity limits, numerous scenarios where an individual permit is either required or could be implemented by MD, and others I don't have time to mention. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Ballantyne.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Tom Ballantyne on behalf of NIOP Maryland. I'd like to touch on just a couple of additional concerns that we have with the bill. One of the key provisions in this legislation says that a permit holder may not cause or allow runoff from a construction site. We just don't see how to comply with that. The central purpose of the construction permit is to set the conditions on which runoff is permitted. Respectfully, we just don't see the bill as tailored in its footprint. Buildings aren't located in the floodplain, but on occasion, utilities or stream crossing requires disturbance of the floodplain. This would trigger an individual permit in all of those circumstances. Baltimore City reports 5,000 acres of floodplain within its jurisdiction. The history, tier 2 watersheds, the high quality watersheds, are places where buildings, we don't build very often. There are instances around the state where there are construction projects near those watersheds, but this bill contains connective language on page 3 that applies its provisions to a project that is in a watershed or a catchment that drains into a high quality watershed. So we're just not sure what that means in terms of the geographic extent. In terms of kind of the context of this and how it fits into the legislative history on stormwater, these industry groups supported legislation allowing the public to intervene in the Clean Water Act enforcement actions that are initiated by MDE We supported the bill that the sponsor referenced that requires stormwater regulations to be updated every 5 years to contain the latest climate science. We supported the additional protective measures that are in the new general permit. We just think that this bill is too broad and very difficult to comply with, and are here respectfully in opposition for those reasons.
Okay, thank you for your testimony. Do I have any questions from any of the members? Senator Croza? You're trying. Okay. But you're not locked out.
Thank you.
You're good.
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony. And I think since it was referenced, not all of the members have seen some of the testimony. I just want to make sure, again, I'm understanding your testimony and what I'm reading from the Maryland Department of the Environment. And they do reference that they've worked with the bill sponsor, but they say that they're working on amendments, plural, and it sounds like you have addressed some of those issues. But when you talk about the fact that this is already in place, are you talking about in the letter from MDE, it says the construction general permit recently underwent a significant revision, which included 2 public comment periods and a public hearing. The final permit was issued on December 27th of this year with an effective date of what, I guess it hasn't gone into effect in April.
Mm-hmm.
So that, were you part of that process?
You want to answer?
Yes, the answer is yes. We put in comments. Again, we did not oppose it. We put in some comments. We worked with MDE on the final product. It was a long process. I think it took 3 or 4 years to get there, but we did work with them on it.
So, I mean, is your sense that some of what the bill is requiring is already covered in what you just went through with these, I guess, internally with MDE?
Yes, I think most of what this bill attempts to address is already covered under the new general permit once it's implemented. And that effectively is just simply unnecessary to address, say, for example, tier 2 projects in tier 2 watersheds. Those are already specifically addressed in many ways by the new general permit. Applying an individual permit process to that is unnecessary.
Okay, thank you for that information.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, seeing none, that concludes the bill hearing on Senate Bill 471. And before we turn to the final bill of the day, Senator Hester, I do have some information from OIS. Apparently they pushed, here's the bottom line, log off and then log back in. And apparently they pushed a code to allow for senators, I think this is actually good, senators to be able to access witness testimony to the bills they are primary sponsors of. Yeah, well, anyway, so I guess as part of that, they pushed some code and turned off the system. But if you log off, log back in, you should be good to go. And so in any event, that's the long and short of it. With that said, Senator Hester, we're going to turn to the final bill of the day, Senate Bill 830. And we've got, hold on one second. We've got a sponsor panel of Lori Graff, Matt Comers, Dominic Butchko as your 3 sponsor panelists on Senate Bill 830, which should be our last bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the EEE Committee, for your consideration of Senate Bill 830, which aims to improve the efficiency and consistency by which our local health departments and environmental health staff operate. For those of you who were here last year, 1, 2, I guess you'll remember this bill, but for everybody else, it's brand new. As you probably know, septic systems make up at least half of the households in my district. And they're complicated and costly pieces of the construction process. And they're also time consuming, but incredibly important to get right. I have worked with the Department of the Environment, the Department of Health, Industry, and other key stakeholders to improve this process for the past several years. For those of you who were here last year, you'll recall that over the 2020 interim, MDE established a working group which engaged across the state on this topic, and we had 6 listening sessions with industry practitioners, government employees, and key stakeholders, ranging from the building industry to the agritourism industry and to all the people who actually work on these septic systems. And what I just passed around in your folder was a copy of 2 of the most interesting, I thought, results of those listening sessions, one specifically from the agriculture industry and one from the building industry. In summary, what we found is that the time it takes for the approval of these septic system permits varies dramatically. It can be 1 month, it can be 6 months, it can be 18 months. And that's often without adequate and consistent communication between our local health departments and the permit applicants. There's also a significant confusion between the regulatory authorities of the Department of Health and the Department of the Environment, resulting in the 2 agencies, sitting on a Zoom with me, pointing their fingers at each other, going, "Hey, no, it's their problem. No, it's their problem." That I think is not a good way to run a government. And finally, the state has really not adequately supported our local environmental health specialists in terms of hiring, paying competitive wages, and upgrading the IT that they use. And so the solution to improving what's currently taking an overly long time is multifold. Last year, we did pass Delegate Stein's bill to increase licensing requirements for septic system inspectors. You may remember Senator West was here with 007, which was a technical amendment to improve that bill. Now that bill took care of the private sector side. And what this bill is taking care of is the public sector side, the permitting process through our local health departments. So specifically, SB 830 will do the following. First, it aims to improve consistency and efficiency. We're looking for a consistent interpretation and application of the COMAR regulations across our local environmental health departments. Secondly, we're improving we want to inform those applying for permits that there is an appeals process. And so if their application is denied, there is a way to appeal to the state. And third, we're taking a good look at the delegation of authority for the environmental health code, for the environmental code to the Department of Health. For those of you who remember Secretary Tablada, who recently retired, he was there like 30 years ago when we gave the Department of Health the authority to enforce the Department of the Environment Code. And he literally told me on his way out the door, this hasn't worked for 30 years. It's not a good situation. Secondly, this bill will improve our IT infrastructure for environmental health staff by developing an online tracking system for applications in consultation with applicants, permit holders, and local health departments. Now, they've already started a pilot of this, I believe in Wycomico County. They are now stuck in the MITDP process, waiting for funding and permission to move ahead. We need to get this online system up and running. Time to come into the 21st century. Third, Senate Bill 830 will improve staffing in this field by doing 3 things: funding 3 additional MDE staff to support our local health departments, requiring MDE and MDH to conduct a staffing study on the needs, education, and licensing requirements, and to assess the feasibility of an apprenticeship program in the field. And third, it establishes a loan assistance repayment program to provide longer-term incentives for recruitment and retention, which are critical to ensuring that the counties, the counties are not in this situation in the first place. We are currently working on an amendment with the Maryland Department of the Environment, but we really feel like the time is right to provide additional resources for MDE in this area. And not to steal your thunder, but as we look for ways to consider more affordable housing, we really need to speed up this permitting process, and we have to improve the public sector size, the public sector customer experience when they engage with our permitting process. And so for these reasons, I respectfully request a favorable report on Senate Bill 830.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Graff, why don't we just go down the row?
Thank you. Lori Graff, again, for the record, CEO of Maryland Building Industry Association, very enthusiastically supportive of this bill. And thank you so much to Senator Hester for her leadership on this issue. We have been working with her for several years to try to get this right. You've heard me say over and over again, we need more housing. We have to make it more affordable. And that's time. Time is money. And this is just an unpredictable process. I've been working with the builders for 17 years now, and over and over again, what we need is predictability and consistency. And one of the biggest frustrations has been with septics and figuring out the best way to get them installed. Once you put your permit in, you have no idea where it goes. There's a lot of frustration, a lot of confusion. This bill goes a long way to really helping that. I will talk really quickly about the online system. That is extremely important. We are antiquated in the state, especially on the septic systems, and we really need to figure out a way to make it more transparent, more active, so we know where permits are in the process. That's a very important piece of the puzzle for us. But mostly our builders just want to know where things are, consistency, and this really goes a long way with that. So with that, I request a favorable report. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Good afternoon. My name is Matt Cummers, members of the committee. I appreciate the opportunity to provide initial comment on this bill. I'm representing the Maryland Conference of Local Environmental Health Directors. And we're staffed with environmental health specialists. So this type of bill will affect our departments directly. The environmental health offices throughout the state are delegated as the approving authorities for all on-site sewage disposal systems. So we're actually representing all of the people who are doing this work here. So we support this bill with amendments. A lot of different aspects of this bill that we find very helpful, including the student loan forgiveness program, as well as the additional staffing for MDE, and developing consistent standards, appeal rights, et cetera. A lot of the other things that were said. There are some aspects of this bill that we feel like require amendment, including the tracking database aspects of that. One that, the bill actually calls for developing a timeline and also estimates for how long it would take and how much it's going to cost to put together that database, but at the same time requires a database to be developed. So I feel like it's a cart before the horse scenario. The study, we are also in support of studying environmental health. However, we feel that perhaps the University of Maryland Agriculture Extension Service is not exactly the right way to go about that. We support a unbiased higher education organization conducting that study, such as the one that was conducted in 2005. Johns Hopkins University Public Health performed that study, and actually a lot of the deficiencies identified in that 2005 study have yet to be addressed. So we definitely think that this is a good bill in a lot of different ways, but we support some amendments. The conference also suggests that we look at root causes here because staffing and pay is a huge part of this, and unless we address those root causes, we're not going to make any improvements. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Dominic.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, Dominic Butchko with the Maryland Association of Counties. First, I want to thank the senator for working on this issue. I worked with you a lot last year. I know you're working with my colleague this year, and this is a big thing we need to solve. MACO does have some technical amendments, and I would refer you to our written testimony, which is actually rather extensive on this bill. But the gist of what we need more investment at the local level. This bill does a great job at addressing things at the state level, but a lot of this, where the rubber meets the road, is with our counties and our county departments. The student loan program referenced is a really good first start, but it's not funded near enough. As well as my colleague over here, from the environmental health directors, salaries are nowhere near what they should be for people at this level, especially when you consider the private sector, as well as just other resources in general, so that we can recruit and retain. And we hear this a lot, but for environmental health, it's pretty big. I want to leave you guys with a story really quick. So Baltimore City, I was having a conversation over the summer with their environmental health director, and they were telling me a story about how they hired this brand new student right out of school. They actually graduated, so they weren't a student, but right out of school. They worked for 3 months, one of the best employees they ever had. 3 months later, someone from the private sector comes, scoops them up, and they're making double the salary, if not a little bit more. This is not a unique story that we're hearing at the local level. And if we really want to fix this issue, it's going to take investment. It's going to take investment from the state, because counties can't do it alone. So this is a great start, and we look forward to working with the senator on getting it to perfect. And we urge a favorable report with amendments. Thank you.
Okay, any questions for the panel? Senator Carozza.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Senator Hester, for your work on this. You mentioned Wycomico County. My effort has been with this group in Wycomico County, where we have faced multiple issues across the board, whether it's the issues with the septics themselves, whether it's the backlog in permitting. And I want to thank the Maryland Department of the Environment, because in order to even just address the immediate issue we had, they worked with us a creative solution, and actually involving Maryland Environmental Services to come in and help with some staffing issues just to push this out. So this is really multi, it is complex and it's multi level. And so as I'm trying to go through, I am really trying to see how this is going to impact, not only Wycomico County, but the other challenges, because I think each county is in a different place. So my question is, and just getting to kind of a little bit of the complexity and why this is a little confusing, and I'm thinking that, Mr. Hummers, you can probably address this. There's a lot of confusion about the local environmental health directors, because you've got the Department of Health involved, you've got the Department of the Environment involved, you got the county involved, you got the state involved, and everybody, and sometimes you've got the pointing of the fingers. Can one of you kind of flush out with, kind of what's in front of us here, how maybe we can just bring some clarity to, who's the go-to to begin with?
Yeah.
I mean, that gets into, before you even talk about more staffing and the loan, I think it gets into an organizational issue.
Thank you, Senator Carozza. So that is the heart of the delegated authority, which I agree that we need to find an independent entity to study this. But the code is the Maryland Environmental Code. The local departments of health have the ability to enforce that code. Now, it varies county by county, whether those are state or county employees.
Exactly.
And so if you look at Howard County, those are state employees working under the county health department, but they are paid by the state and they report up through the state. So they are state employees. So when the gentleman from Mako was saying that we need to pay them more, I mean, we do need to pay them more, but they're actually state employees that are working at the local level. And so this study, which is in the uncodified language at the end of the report, goes to the heart of the issue. Everything else prior to that is like working on fixing the confusion now. But until we look at this delegation of authority, I don't think we get to the bottom of what the question that you're asking. You and I are totally on the same page.
Doing it in a way that you have to balance the local authority and flexibility that, our counties have. At the same time, I think with some type of consistency at the state level. So
exactly. And that's what the study would look at. And if you look at the questions that in the uncodified language, if there's any additional questions you want to ask, I'm open to amendments. But the question of who's really in control, and that's why the appeals process is so important.
Yeah. May I?
Yes, please.
Ultimately, the regulations are the Department of the Environment, right? So all of this comes back to the Department of the Environment, and the Department of the Environment has chosen to delegate the authority sometimes to county governments, sometimes to local health departments that are MDH organizations. And sometimes, like Baltimore City is not exactly a county either. So, there are all various different types of delegation agreements, but ultimately at the heart of this is the Maryland Department of the Environment. So the standards and the consistency and all of that has to come from the Department of the Environment. Yeah, if that makes any sense. They're regulations.
Okay, any additional questions for the panel? Okay, excellent. Thank you. So that concludes the bill hearing on Senate Bill 830 and concludes. Yes, Senator Hester.
Thank you. I did have one more witness who I believe had signed up. Maybe it was from Clean Water Action.
Is she here? She didn't sign up. Yeah. Okay, I mean, if
Her testimony is in the folder, but it'd be nice.
Okay, yeah, well, come on up. If you thought, if it was your intent to include her. Yeah, absolutely. Just make sure you tell us your name and you get 2 minutes and that'll be our final witness.
All right, I can make it fast. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Emily Ranson with Clean Water Action here in support of Senate Bill 830. As you've heard, there are various problems with the septic world, but understaffing both at MDE and the local health departments are a major problem that hold us back from being able to address problems. Addressing those two issues will go a long way to making headway to tackling the various problems with our septic systems. So thank you, and we urge a favorable report.
Okay, any questions for our final witness? Seeing none, that concludes the bill hearing on Senator Hester's bill. Senate Bill 830 concludes the bill hearings for today. Folks, we're at 10, what do we need a 10-minute break to reboot, and then let's come back and see if we can get some bills out of the committee to the floor, and we'll see where we land, okay?